Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're starting part 1 of an awesome What If Deku was kidnapped and reappeared as a villain at the USJ story. If you want to see part 2, drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now let's jump into the story. Green eyes stare at the one-way mirror, and although 𝐒𝐿 knows he can't possibly see him, he feels watched by the villain smirking his way. His cheek rests in his right palm, the fingers of his left hand idly thrumming atop the interrogation table. The quirk suppressant HNDCFFS are perfunctory, since the boy is quirkless according to the files. The kid unnerves him. So, that is the young man 𝐒𝐬𝐽 captured at the USJ. 𝐒𝐿 spins around and looks down at Nezu. He nods once before walking him over to the door leading into the interrogation room. He swallows heavily, hand on the handle when Nezu speaks up again, stopping him in his tracks. "Don't be so nervous, detective." "Easier said than done," he replies, and finally enters. The kid's grin impossibly widens as he sits up straight, spreading his hands as wide as the linked cuffs will allow. "Detective lie detector and Principal Nezu. To think you two would come to personally interrogate little old me, it flatters me." His voice is deeper than 𝐒𝐿 expected from the looks of him, carefree despite his situation, but underneath it there is the slightest hint of measured calculation that makes him shiver. Next to him Nezu, whose speciality is interrogating villains too smart for their own good, remains unfazed and instead returns the smile, all teeth. "Midoriya Izuku," he starts, black eyes sharp. "Why, of course I wouldn't miss the chance to talk to the person who broke into my school." "Don't be silly." 𝐒𝐿 expected some sort of reaction from the villain, but his unnerving smirk and sharp eyes remain unchanged. He watches them closely as they sit down and 𝐒𝐿 puts the pitiful file they have on him on the table between them. A green eyebrow rises mockingly as he looks at the file. "I have my own folder." Nezu raises his paws. "Why, of course you do." His smirk grows a fraction still. "Not very thick though, I see." 𝐒𝐿 clears his throat, more to calm his nerves than anything else. "For the record, this interrogation will be recorded, and my quirk, lie detector, will be active and used throughout." The villain rolls his eyes. Yeah, can we get to the fun part yet? I've been here for 2 hours and have places to be, you know." At the glare he throws at him the teenager shrugs sheepishly. "Fine, I'll take this more seriously." Turning to Nezu, he jabs a thumb at 𝐒𝐿. "Is he always such a spoilsport, or is it just my charm?" Choosing to ignore the attempted banter, 𝐒𝐿 instead opens the file to have something to look at that wasn't bottomless green eyes. Midoriya Izuku, age 15, quirkless, reported missing at age 10 - I was kidnapped. He looks up. "Pardon?" "I was kidnapped," he repeats, expression unchanged. "And I'm no longer quirkless." Nezu speaks up, then, asking a question they suspect the answer to, but need confirmed. "Who kidnapped you?" Midoriya leans back in the chair, elbows resting on the arms and hands folded. His answer chills 𝐒𝐿 to the bones. "All for one." "No." He must have misheard. "What?" The teen rolls his eyes. "You heard me the first time." Nezu, calm as always, leans forward with gleaming eyes, and 𝐒𝐿 is incredibly grateful that at least one of them still has their wits about them. "How about you tell us from the beginning, Midoriya-kun?" Midoriya shrugs and averts his eyes slightly. "He claimed my intellect caught his interest. He took me on my way home from school. The next thing I know he forces a quirk on me and attempts to mold me into his loyal follower." 𝐒𝐿 frowns. "Attempts?" "Well," he starts, locking eyes with him. "Like most kids, I wanted to be a hero, like All Might. I wasn't especially inclined to follow the very man who had almost killed my idol, you understand." Shrugging again, he leans forward, arms crossed on the table and expression unmoving. "Regardless, I was a 10-year-old child far from home in the lair of the worst villain the world has ever seen. So, I was forced to adapt. I did what he told me to do. I became the assistant to his personal mad scientist, helped keep him alive, helped create his 𝐿𝐿, became his hacker and strategist." He clicks his tongue in irritation, expression souring. I became the babysitter for a temperamental man-child 5 years my senior. And now you're here. For the first time since the start of the interrogation, the teen seems caught off guard, but he collects himself almost immediately. He looks at Nezu. Now I'm here, he agrees. 𝐒𝐿 frowns, looking back at the file. You say you were his personal strategist. Looking back up at him, he tries to sound nonchalant. Must be a blow to your ego that your plan failed. The smirk is back, eyes narrowed, and the villain taps the table with his index finger lazily. Did it? You were captured. 𝐒𝐿 can't help the irritation creeping into his voice. Midoriya got under his skin in all the worst ways, more and more the longer the interrogation went on without his quirk registering a lie. The teen reaches forward, tapping his file as he rests his cheek in his right palm like he was bored. I'm quite sure my file should contain my IQ test from when I was 8. It does. 190 at the age of 8, and 𝐒𝐿 doesn't want to imagine what it would be now, after years of being honed and molded by a supervillain and a mad scientist. Midoriya waves his left hand lazily. Now, detective, I would like to ask you a question. What makes you think my plan failed, exactly? As the implication sinks in, 𝐒𝐿 gulps. You planned for Eraserhead to capture you. The villain claps slowly and drawls. That's right. Good job. At his side, Nezu keeps watching them silently, expression unreadable. 𝐒𝐿 would have none of this, though. Why would you want to be captured? Shigaraki said you had planned to kill All Might at the USJ, so why would your plan include getting captured? From 1 second to the next, Midoriya's expression turns from smirking boredom to distress, large green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I was kidnapped, detective. Held captive for 5 years and tortured. Why wouldn't I jump at the chance to flee? No sooner had he uttered the words did the tears dry and the mask returned. He raises an unimpressed eyebrow. Now, detective, I said I'd take this seriously, and I will. I was tasked with planning the murder of All Might, I won't deny that. Naturally, I planned contingencies, because unlike Tomura I am not an idiot. Tomura is a toddler in the body of a man with a terrifying quirk. But, he leans back and sighs deeply. He trusts me, for better or for worse. And as long as I manage to rein in his temper tantrums, All for One doesn't interfere. He waves disinterestedly again, and 𝐒𝐿 is starting to wonder if it's a nervous tic of his to move around so much. He wants to make Tomura his successor, though I'm not entirely sure what all that entails. At any rate, he takes a very hands-off approach, only guides him and gives him whatever he needs, whether it's the 𝐿 or me. Tomura tasked me with planning All Might's murder, but that wasn't the end of it. It's something even All for One hasn't managed, so I made several plans. Plan A was for the case that All Might was at the USJ but hadn't used up his 3 hours. At this point, 𝐒𝐿 was too frazzled to stop and wonder how a child could know so much, and he was too afraid to ask. The 𝐿 was supposed to fight All Might, and I was to fight Eraserhead. I don't use my quirk, so I was the best match for him. Plan B was for the case that All Might had been an idiot and used up his time. In that case, Tomura, Kurogiri, and the 𝐿 were to scram once reinforcements showed up irregardless of whether All Might was dead. No matter what the outcome was, I was supposed to let Eraserhead capture me. We couldn't know whether All Might had already passed on One for All, so I should pretend to defect, play up the traumatized child and gain your trust, find out if there is a successor and eliminate them. Nezu smiles, and 𝐒𝐿 wonders if the following question was merely rhetorical. Then why didn't you? I don't need to pretend something that's true. 𝐒𝐿 was quite done with the interrogation. Are you sure you aren't just pulling this because you don't want to admit that your plan failed? If 𝐒𝐿 didn't know better, the villain's surprised expression could almost be believable, but his voice didn't match it at all. Detective, have I even once lied to you? His quirk hadn't detected anything, and he wasn't sure what to think about that. Midoriya chuckles. I helped make that 𝐿, detective. I was very diligent during my research into All Might's strength. His smirk was razor-sharp as he pins him with his cold green eyes. I repeat, detective, I am not an idiot. His blood runs cold. All this, just to escape. 𝐒𝐿's voice is low, and he has to ball his hands to fists underneath the table to prevent them from shaking. Midoriya regards him quizzically, and finally looks more his age. You don't simply run from the League, from the underworld's boogeyman. As far as All for One is concerned right now, I'm currently convincing you that I am nothing but a harmless, traumatized child, all while sussing out if there is a successor for One for All. That's the official plan. He leans forward, and regards them with what must be the first honest expression he'd shown them that day. I have no love for them. They kidnapped me when I was just a child. If you will let me, I will gladly help you bring them down. Why should we trust you? Well, did I lie? Not as far as Naomi's quirk was concerned, and it unnerved him more than anything else. But before he could think of a response, there was noise outside the door. It flies open with a loud bang and a crying woman storms in, closely followed by 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 desperately trying and failing to keep her away from the villain. What he sees next makes him doubt the past hour had happened at all. The woman, Midoriya 𝐒𝐭, he would later learn, flings her arms around the teenager, tears running down her cheeks like waterfalls. The villain sits ramrod straight in his chair, green eyes wide and his carefully crafted mask slowly breaking. He reaches to cling to his mother's shirt as a wild sob tears from his throat, and begins crying into her shoulder. And despite his flawless innocent act before, Naomisa has no doubt that this time, his reaction is genuine, and for the first time he truly, honestly looks like an abducted child finally returning home. Naomisa isn't sure what to make of that fact. Katsuki had never told anybody, not even his Fing therapist, but he had always felt responsible for what had happened. After all, if he hadn't childishly, stupidly, pushed Izuku away, if they had remained friends, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe Auntie 𝐒𝐭 wouldn't have cried into his mother's shoulder for weeks and months and years. No, he never told anybody. When villains attacked the USJ, he saw a ghost, a simulacrum of the boy he had known. Green eyes cold and hard, a smirk as cruel as his purpose, as Katsuki had been to him for years. The villain had nothing in common with his former friend bar his face. Former friend. And wasn't that the crux of it all? If, at any point, he made a different choice, maybe Izuku wouldn't stand next to villains, declaring that they will kill All Might. It was all his fault. It always had been. No. Nezu merely smiles and takes a sip from his tea. Now, Aizawa-kun, this isn't up for debate, I'm afraid. Shouter's bloodshot eyes twitch, and he practically growls his next words. Absolutely thing not, Nezu. I don't give a SHT what the police and powers that be decided. I won't play the babysitter for a juvenile villain who thinks is all that, and you can't make me. My, Eraserhead, I don't just think that I'm all that. The annoyingly sweet voice of the subject at hand comes from the soft couch behind him, and he doesn't need to look to know that the stupid brat was smirking at him. Besides, you already babysit 20 juvenile wannabe heroes, what's one more teenager going to change? At his words, Shouter does turn around, glaring at the teenager lazily lying on the couch. The difference is that they plan to be upstanding citizens. You, on the other hand, tried to kill us. The anger in his voice doesn't seem to faze the villain. I didn't try to kill you, he points at him, raising an eyebrow. Besides, who's to say I don't plan to reform and become an upstanding citizen myself? Nezu sets his teacup down on the saucer with a resounding clack, and the look in his eyes tells Shouter he's amused by their exchange, even if his face gives nothing away. Aizawa-kun, while I do understand your doubts, the decision has already been made, I'm afraid. Midoriya-kun agreed to wearing a quirk-suppressant collar with GPS tracking. He is not to leave campus without supervision. I control his electronics and monitor anything he does with them. It's a show of goodwill for his offer to help apprehend the League of Villains. Since you were the one to ultimately apprehend him, only you are authorized to remove the collar if you deem him trustworthy. I must ask you to keep in mind that Midoriya-kun himself was a victim in all of this. Shouter knows he's not getting out of this. Still, I don't understand why this means he gets to be around my students, Nezu. It was his plan that put them in danger in the first place. Asui almost died, for FS sake. It was Midoriya who speaks up then. Feel free to treat me as a human punching bag, Eraserhead. His doubts must show on his face because he sits up and makes an effort to look serious for once. The detective made sure I wasn't lying, or I wouldn't be here at all. I'm not saying you have to trust me, I don't actually care, to be honest. But helping to train your students will keep me from going mad from boredom, and help them in the long run. Just take it. 𝐲𝐸 turns to him fully, quirk itching to activate even though it would be useless. My students aren't playthings for you to experiment on and do as you please. Midoriya raises his hands placatingly. I promise I will take it seriously and stop the moment you tell me to. He can't help his resigned huff, closing his eyes tiredly. I'll believe that when I see it, you brat. He opens his eyes to glare at the villain, steel in his voice. If you hurt them, or I even think you might hurt them, you are dead. Oh. Midoriya has the audacity to smirk as he leans back into the couch. That's quite the villain thing to say, isn't it, sensei? Class 1A is unusually quiet when 𝐲𝐸 enters the classroom, though, he supposes, that was only to be expected. These kids had barely been at UA for a week and already had to deal with a full-blown villain attack. Looking at their wary faces, he once again has to stifle his anger at the police department and Nezu for their decision. He looks at Yorozu as she raises her hand, nodding slightly to allow her to speak. Aizawa-sensei, are you all right? He sighs heavily, scratching his cheek and avoiding their eyes. I'm okay, just displeased. The powers that be have decided that the villain I captured, Midoriya Izuku, will be put on probation in exchange for the help he has offered to take down the League of Villains. Where is he? 𝐲𝐸 startles at Bakugo's outburst, all eyes in the classroom now on him. He'd jumped to his feet, but instead of the look of anger 𝐲𝐸 expects to see, he only looks white as a sheet and desperate. With a frown he fully turns towards him, one hand raised and hovering near his capture weapon. It has been decided that Midoriya is low risk and is being housed on campus, and to help in your training going forward. Kaminari is the first to break the heavy silence in the room, laughing nervously. You're joking, right? I wish, 𝐲𝐸 deadpans. Due to extenuating circumstances, Midoriya is deemed worthy of being rehabilitated, and being near aspiring heroes could benefit that, supposedly. Keeping his eyes on Bakugo, he waves at the students to follow him out of the door. He's waiting at Gym Beta. Once his gremlins have changed into their gym uniforms, he walks them towards the quirkless training gym. They are unusually silent, too nervous to chatter amongst each other like usual. Yorozu is the one to finally voice their thoughts out loud. Aizawa-sensei. Why is that villain allowed near us? I mean, he can help without being around us, right? 𝐲𝐸 sighs and wishes he had a better answer for her worries. Worries he shared. He was abducted by the League when he was 10, and apparently intended to be captured during the attack to get away from them. He's your age, so Nezu seems to think spending time with you might help him recover and get him back on the right path. I think that's bullshit, but at least he can't use his quirk or leave campus, and I won't leave you with him without supervision. He knows that isn't what they want to hear, but it's all he can give them without lying to them. His gaze flashes to Bakugo for a moment, who hasn't uttered a single word since his earlier outburst and still looks like a stiff wind could knock him over. What's gotten him this rattled? Why does he care so much about this villain? When he opens the doors to the gym, they are all greeted by one villain on probation doing warm-up stretches. If he didn't know better, he could have mistaken him for just another one of his students. It makes 𝐲𝐸 even more uneasy. When had villains become this young? Midoriya notices them and straightens with a smirk, his green eyes calculating and cold as he crosses his arms. Took you guys long enough. Now, who's gonna be my first victim? In retrospect, 𝐲𝐸 supposes he should have seen this coming. If he really thinks about it, manners probably aren't on the top of the villain's priority list on what values to impart on our prisoner. Didn't mean he has to find it funny. 𝐲𝐸 watches as the villain sighs and lets his arms fall to his side. With a more relaxed expression he looks at the students, looking much more his age despite the cold eyes. That was a joke. Midoriya takes a deep breath, and the grin he puts on could have been charming if it wasn't paired with his emotionless eyes. Listen, Nezu decided that I should help with your training, so I will. It's not like I have anything better to do right now, And since Eraserhead won't let me see your quirks, it's all just hand-to-hand combat. No need to look like I'll kill you. Green eyes zero in on Bakugo, who stiffens even further. The villain raises an eyebrow and his grin turns sharp like a knife's edge. Not like I'm any danger to powerful heroes to be like you, isn't that right, Kaken? Poor little me could never be a challenge, so why don't you give it a shot, for old time's sake? Shouter feels so stupid as things click into place. You two know each other. Why wasn't he told about this? There is no way Nezu didn't know. Oh, quite well, actually. There is something in those green eyes that sends shivers down his spine, and he has to remind himself that Midoriya is 15 and can't use his quirk and is harmless. We grew up together, used to be best friends before he got his quirk and used me as a practice dummy. He pps his head to the side in a mockery of innocent curiosity and spreads his arms in invitation. Well, what do you say, Kaken? Bakugo looks like that's the last thing he wants to do, and Shouter needs to get the full story from his student as soon as possible, because that seems very, very important, but judging by the look of the other students, they were even less willing to do it. Bakugo takes a deep breath and steps forward, coming to stand in front of the smirking villain. Shouter already regrets this. Start whenever you're ready. Bakugo starts with a right hook, and in barely a second he was already on his back, breath knocked out of him in a gasp. Before he can think to move, Midoriya shifts his hold on his arm and flips him onto his stomach and cranes his arm back, eliciting a strangled groan from him. Midoriya looks bored at his pain. Really? A right hook? You already did that when we were children. He lets go and steps away from Bakugo. You're pathetic. Bakugo lunges. Momo covers her mouth with her right hand, feeling sick as she watches the villain toy with one of the strongest people in class without breaking a sweat. He rams a knee into Bakugo's stomach, which seems to finally do him in, and he sinks to the ground, coughing violently. That's quite enough. Aizawa-sensei finally ends the one-sided brawl, one hand on his capture weapon as he steps to Bakugo's side and helps him to his feet. Her classmate waves him off as soon as he stands again, and shoots a glare at the villain. Midoriya only raises an eyebrow, looking utterly bored. Don't give me that look. I, for one, quite enjoyed finally beating the snot out of you. For the first time since his outburst back in their classroom, Bakugo speaks up, and his voice sounds uncharacteristically broken. What the F happened to you, Deku? The bored expression on the villain's face breaks for a moment, quickly replaced with careful blankness. He rolls his eyes and crosses his arms. I was held captive by villains for 5 years, what the F did you expect? Momo is surprised by the disgust and vitriol in his voice, which had been so neutral up to this point. Unlike you, I had to adapt to survive. We can't all be pampered brats. Midoriya seems to think the conversation over with that and instead turns to the rest of them, smirk back in place. Now, who's next? When none of them volunteer, his smirk only grows wider, and, Momo realizes, more predatory. My choice then, wonderful. You, Hagekure, right. Get here. Aizawa-sensei looks like he wants to intervene, but the villain throws him a look that makes their teacher pause. Hagekure slowly, hesitantly, steps towards the mats in the center, and what parts of her body Momo could see spoke volumes of her fear. She can't blame her after what he'd done to Bakugo. Midoriya rolls his eyes again, stance relaxing and turning much more open. Start whenever you want. Hagekure Jayakis then runs forward and attempts to punch him with her right hand. Midoriya's reaction is much slower this time, as if accounting for her hesitance and trying not to hurt her. In one fluid motion he slaps her arm aside with his left hand, and punches her in the stomach with his own right fist. He knocks the wind out of her, but there is much less force behind it than he'd used with Bakugo. Regardless, she sinks to her knees and holds her stomach, taking slow, deep breaths. Hagekure only looks up when he extends his hand to her. She lets him drag her to her feet, and his face is neutral, not mocking or derisive. You're invisible, so use your stealth to your advantage. Your best shot is always to sneak up on someone and knock them out before they can react. You should focus on training your body since your quirk is passive and doesn't support your strength. I shouldn't have been able to see your attack from a mile away. May I? He gestures as if to touch her, And 𝐒𝐩𝐽𝐫𝐞𝐲 in surprise. Sure. Momo watches as he steps to her side and pushes her shoulders back slightly. You need to keep a straight back, also tense your abs. He pushes onto her stomach as he says this, surprisingly gentle from the looks of it. When you go for a punch, use your legs and hips for momentum. Keep your stance secure. Midoriya pushes her lightly and nods when he deems her stance okay. Next, no unnecessary movement, keep your arms close and tense. Your hands, here, I can't see them so I'll have to dash. He demonstrates how to make a fist with his own hand, then seems to grab 𝐒𝐻𝐾's to make sure she's doing it right. He directs his next words to all of them. Never put your thumb inside your fist, you'll only break your hand. Hit with your first joints, keep the back of your hand and your lower arm level with each other. Move quickly and with as much power as you can. Stepping back, Midoriya resumes his earlier stance. Try again. None of the class end up landing a hit on Midoriya, but after each of their attempts he took the time to correct their mistakes and give them pointers for those with visible quirks. At the end of the session Momo is a lot less tense, as are most of her classmates. It seems Midoriya really won't do anything with their teacher around, and except for his bout with Bakugo, which seems to have more to do with their shared past and less with the teenager being a villain, he had been extremely careful and surprisingly gentle. As Aizawa-sensei ushers them out Midoriya goes back to his stretching routine, looking no worse for wear while most of them would likely have a number of bruises for days to come. Beside her Kirishima follows her gaze. I can't believe he didn't even break a sweat. He sounds more impressed than annoyed, which Momo can't fault him for. Midoriya was extremely good, though the probable way he came to be that good was something she didn't want to dwell on. Jiru shudders at his other side. It's kinda scary how easy it looked. Well, Kirishima says, trying to lighten the mood a bit. That just makes our Aizawa-sensei even more impressive, doesn't it? He captured him, after all. As her classmates continue to talk amongst themselves, Momo hears their teacher murmur behind her. We need to talk, Bakugo. Kai regarded the boy curiously. When the underworld's boogeyman had offered one of his top men, he hadn't expected a child, and now he was wondering if the man was merely pulling his leg. Then the boy spoke, and he shuddered at the cold voice that did not fit someone merely 13 years of age. We expect steady shipments of trigger to this address, the boy stated as he slid a piece of paper across the table. And what will we get in return? Kai was no fool, and neither was the boogeyman. The Yakuza might have lost a lot of their power, but their names still held weight in the underworld. Nothing in their world was free. The boy smirked, or at least Kai thought he did. It was hard to tell behind the black medical mask he wore. Idly, he wondered if that was its true purpose. The boy leaned back, his gloved hands folded in front of him, and his flat, green eyes regarded Kai like a bug under a microscope. We know of your little pet project, Overhaul. We also know that you've hit a minor, roadblock, so to speak. I am here to help you overcome this little setback. His eyes narrowed. Now, where's that little girl I've heard so much about, Kai? The underworld's boogeyman was often likened to the devil, and working with him tended to bring with it the feeling of agreeing to a Faustian pact. Did this make the boy Mephistopheles? In that moment, Kai felt like he had sealed his fate when he agreed to this meeting. He wasn't wrong. After all, we all remember the fate of Dr. Faustus. In his years as a teacher, Shouter has seen a lot. Mostly things he'd like to forget, but also a lot of kids too big for their britches who think they're all that. Much like Midoriya, but in a very different way. He'd assumed Bakugo was one of them, but evidently this particular pond went much deeper than he let on. He stares at his student, arms folded on the back of his chair. Bakugo is still unnervingly quiet, and deciding that he's waited long enough for him to start, he speaks up instead. So, what's the story? Bakugo flinches and moves his gaze to his clasped hands. He chews his lip in thought. Our moms are old friends, so we grew up together. Shouter gestures for him to continue. When I got my quirk, people started showering me with praise, telling me what a great hero I'd be. Nothing I did was ever my fault. You got your quirk, and Midoriya didn't. Right? Bakugo breathes wearily, running a hand through his hair. It took me so long to realize all the fed-up SHT that happened. Let me guess, 𝐻𝐸𝐽 says, snarkier than intended. It makes his student twitch. That introspection began 5 years ago. Bakugu audibly swallows. More or less. When Izuku was diagnosed quirkless, he stops, snorts. Diagnosed. That's such a dumb way to say it, isn't it? Whatever. I became real nasty. Don't get me wrong, I was never a great brat, but after SHT, I got bad. Do you know what Deku means, sensei? 𝐻𝐸𝐽 frowns. Useless. Bakugu exhales sharply. Right. That was his name, afterwards. Deku. I don't think most people even knew his real name at school. Sometimes even teachers would call him that. Not just that, I made DMN sure no one would want to be friends with him. Unless they wanted he pauses, swallowing thickly before soldiering on. Unless they wanted to be used for quirk practice too. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 stiffens, leaning forward and pinning him with his eyes. Are you telling me that you used your explosions on him? The chuckle Bakugu lets out lacks humor. Yep, and you wanna know the best part? Our teachers blamed him, they encouraged me. Acted like it would be good training for heroics. SHT was so fed up. Bakugu's red eyes meet 𝐻𝐸𝐽's, and he grimaces. That wasn't the worst thing though. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 leans forward on his arms. What could have possibly been worse? Bakugu takes a wet breath. The day he was kidnapped, I had beat him up again. Gave him several burns with my quirk. Then, before I left him, his student's breath hitches and he buries his face in his hands. I told him to jump off a bridge and spare us all the hassle of dealing with him. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 feels cold to the marrow of his bones. It's my fault, sensei, Bakugu breathes hoarsely. If I hadn't treated him like garbage, stayed his friend, walked home together, none of this would have happened. Toshinori wasn't exactly sure how he'd react once he saw the teenager, the villain, behind the USJ attack again. When Nezu had told him that he'd been of all for one's personal tacticians and scientists at a mere 15, he'd coughed up more BLD than ever before in shock. This boy was dangerous and needed to be locked into the depths of Tartarus, not let loose on innocent children. How could Nezu, the police and the HPSC justify this? House him on campus and train 1A, the class he'd put in mortal danger at the USJ. All for One has had 5 years with him, there is no way to tell what he'd done to him. Nothing he said would change their minds, though, he was sure. However, Toshinori had hoped he'd have more time before coming face to face with Midoriya Izuku again. As it is, he finds the young villain at one of the tables. In the teacher's lounge, surrounded by papers and typing away at his laptop. Toshinori had only wanted a cup of tea before getting to 1BS heroics class, for God's sake. Midoriya's eyes are glued to his laptop, a pencil stuck between his lips and head resting in his left palm. A pair of slightly too large reading glasses are sitting precariously on the tip of his nose. Green eyes like polished gemstones shoot towards him, staring at him from across the silver rim of his glasses. The gaze is like steel, so much like his nemesis it robs the air from Toshinori's lungs. They are eyes made of ice, old beyond measure and barren of a soul. What had All for One done to this child? The moment is gone in an instant. Midoriya takes the pencil out of his mouth with a right hand covered in scars, a smirk curling his lips that someone makes his young face look like that of a predator. Oh, All Might, to what do I owe this pleasure? Toshinori feels a wet cough rise in his throat and fights it down, unwilling to show the villain how weak he truly was and knowing it was a fool's errand. The boy had apparently studied all his weaknesses to AT, so what good was it to try and save face? He must have been silent for a little too long because Midoriya sighs and averts his eyes. I'm not gonna bite, you know. Swallowing thickly, Toshinori turns to the kitchenette in the corner of the lounge. I was actually going to make some tea. Would you like some? Daring to glance back, he's met with an amused smirk and a single raised eyebrow. Sure, thank you. Midoriya keeps his eyes on him the entire time he's busy with the kettle and tea, following his every movement like a hawk until he sets 2 cups on the table between them. Deciding against his gut feeling, Toshinori sits down across from him. So, he clears his throat. What are you working on? Midoriya's amusement seems to become slightly more genuine, if the subtle change in his cold, dead eyes is anything to go by. Nothing much. Aizawa won't let me see the kid's quirks in action yet, so I'm focusing on something the police want my help with instead. Toshinori immediately regrets his decision to take a sip from his tea, burning his tongue when he gasps in shock. Unperturbed, Midoriya hands him a tissue from his laptop bag. Please take care not to spill any tea on my notes, Yagi-san. Okay, he thinks, bewildered. How? Did that man give him an omniscience quirk? No, I also cannot read minds, to answer your next question. You're just remarkably bad at hiding your tracks and too easy to read for your own good. Besides, he taps the collar around his neck. Quirk suppressant, remember. Has anyone ever told you that you're scary? The words are out of his mouth before he can stop them, and he receives hearty laughter for his embarrassment. Not to my face at least, no. Green eyes twinkle, looking almost human again. The police want my help tracking down the hero killer. I'm fairly sure they just want to test me and make sure I have a use beyond ratting out the league. Midoriya shrugs, taking off his reading glasses and closing his laptop to fully focus on Toshinori. At least it's a good way to relax. Toshinori eyes the reading glasses at the teen's elbow, then watches as he blows the tea before taking a careful sip. You are quite young to need reading glasses. That, of all things, makes the villain stop short, a slight frown making its way onto his face. It's a side effect from the quirk all for one forced on me. My body couldn't quite handle the side effects from activation. The frown quickly disappears as he sets down the cup of tea, once again making way for a smirk. You've asked me quite a few questions now, Yagi-san. May I ask one of my own? Toshinori is sure he'll regret it, but nods all the same. Is there a successor yet? He was right. He frowns and Midoriya quickly raises his hands placatingly. I don't want to know who, if there is one. It's much more fun to find that out on my own. The stare he fixes him with is calculating. I just want to know if there is one at all. For a moment Toshinori entertains the thought of lying, but ultimately decides against it. The villain would look through it anyways. There isn't. Midoriya nods, more to himself, and takes another sip of tea. That's what I thought. When Tsukochi interrogated you, Toshinori starts, and Midoriya hums, gazing at him across the rim of his mug. You implied you planned for me to defeat that Nomu thing. What's your justification for that to the League? A cunning smirk makes its way onto Midoriya's face, sending a shiver down Toshinori's spine. I'm so glad you asked. The young villain puts his glasses back on and begins rummaging through the piles upon piles of paperwork and folders scattered on the desk, finally handing him a stack of stapled papers. Here you go, he beams, tapping the stack with his left index finger. I highlighted the important bit, but feel free to read the whole thing. Toshinori looks at the first page in confusion, eyes skimming over the first few paragraphs haphazardly when he feels his pulse pick up speed. He looks back up at the villain who simply smiles without a care in the world. Is this Dash? The USJ invasion plan as presented to Shigaraki and All for One? Yes. I took copies of all my research with me, naturally, he shrugs, returning to his tea with an air of nonchalance. I figured you'd like a copy, for prosperity. He shudders and returns his eyes to the printout. Recalling what Midoriya had said, he flips through the stack until he finds the highlighted paragraph and feels his BLD run cold. Due to the lack of a shock neutralization quirk in our possession, we have opted for a shock absorption quirk instead. Coupled with regeneration and super strength as well as the prototype's enhanced stamina and base muscle mass, the subject should be able to withstand the target's output at 100%. As we have only been able to test the subject for a limited PRD of time, we cannot say for certain how its reduced higher brain function from quirk information overload and the target's tendency to self-destructive behavior when faced with endangered civilians may impact its performance in the field. Taking this into consideration, we have calculated a 1.47% of failure for the subject to succeed in eliminating the target on its own. In the case of failure, however, the subject should have weakened the target sufficiently to allow for swift disposal provided backup does not arrive in the meantime. Toshinori isn't quite sure what he'd expected from Midoriya, but he certainly hadn't expected it to sound so clinical. He looks back up at the teenager Olei to find bright green eyes watching him, gauging his reaction. Meeting his gaze, he quirks an eyebrow. "I'll tell you what I told Tsukochi, I'm not an idiot." Midoriya leans back in his chair, lazily sipping his tea. The 𝐻𝐼 was engineered to be defeated after a certain amount of hits at over 100% of one for all. The doctor was too busy working on the second generation of 𝐻𝐼 to care much for this one, and technically I made sure it could defeat you in theory. I don't make it a habit to lie, but I like to tip the scales in my favor. Toshinori lowers the stack of papers to the desk, unsure how to react. In the end, he opts for a simple question. Why? Midoriya shrugs, suddenly averting his gaze. The boy seems too smooth for it to be a true tell. You were my childhood idol, I don't want your BLD on my hands. He turns back to him, smirking. Shouldn't you get ready for class, All Might? Looking to the clock hanging above the door, he quickly jumps up, expanding into his buff form in a puff of smoke. Before he can dash to the door, though, Midoriya holds a file out to him, eyes unreadable and deep. I know you aren't speaking, but do get this to Sasaki, will you? Toshinori hesitates. What could All for One strategist want from his former sidekick? Warily, he takes the manila folder and tucks it into his suit, leaving the teenager with a curt nod. Much like his nemesis, Midoriya Izuku was an enigma rolled up into a mystery. The man down in the alley seemed to be your average addict, fidgety from withdrawal and gaunt with atrophied muscles. Heavy hands fell on the boy's shoulders, and the raspy breaths that filtered through All for One's temporary support system sent shivers down his spine. What's wrong? His voice asks with a sickening sweetness. It shouldn't be hard. The boy knew that it wasn't. The man in the alley was already halfway through death's door, it wouldn't take much to finish the job. The boy hated that he knew this the moment he'd laid eyes on him. In a way he felt silly, really. So long he'd spent wishing for a quirk, and now that he had one he refused to use it. But he wanted to be a hero. And heroes don't use their quirks on innocent people, don't use them to kill and prove their worth to villains and boogeymen. But did he ever have a choice? Do I have to educate you again? Cold dread gripped the boy's heart in an iron grasp, lungs constricted by burning vices. He shook his head no. Good, All for One cooed. Kurogiri. There was black and burning ozone and nothingness, and then he stood right behind the shaking man, unnoticed. He tried to remember the specifics of his new quirk, what Sensei had told him, and gulped. Activating it was a struggle, as it always was. Keeping it active was torture, as it always was. But when the boy thought of the villain who had ruined his life, ripped him from his mother, the heavy weight on his chest felt lighter. When he thought of All for One, keeping the quirk active was a breeze. When he thought of All for One, using it on an innocent man was so easy. When the boy thought of being educated, the scars on his body burned and his quirk flared, the intense emotions burning in his gut feeding its power. A last kick to the man's head extinguished his life as easily as the flame of a candle. He breathed heavily, less from exertion and more from the emotional turmoil as a part of him died. There was no going back, he knew, as he was engulfed by black nothingness once more. He'd made his bed. Now to lie in it. Izuku is shaken out of his reverie when he almost runs into the front door of the announcer booth. He shakes his head in an attempt to clear the memories from his mind and takes a deep breath, holds for 2, then lets it out for 2 more, finally feeling like he can play the part again. All the world's a stage, he whispers and smirks, quickly opening the door before he could lose himself in memories again. Yamada and Aizawa turn to look at him as he enters, the former smirking the moment his eyes fall on the hoodie he's wearing. Aizawa, meanwhile, merely stares blankly, evidently unsure what to say. Tilting his head, Izuku raises an eyebrow. Is something the matter, Eraser? Cat got your tongue. Are you really? The hero starts, voice dripping with waning patience. Wearing a hoodie the exact same color as your hair, saying villainous cinnamon roll. Why, do you want one? I'm sure I can find you one with cat ears on the hood if you ask me nicely. Aizawa shakes his head slowly, turning back around to the wide glass window. And here I was under the impression villains had a fashion sense. Oh. Izuku leans back, hands clasped behind his back. He feels his smirk slowly morph into a genuine smile. Did you really just joke around with me, Eraser? Growing on you, am I? Like a fungus, he deadpans, waving at the chair between him and Yamada. Now sit down and do whatever Nezu wants you to do. And do it quietly, you're already giving me a migraine. Smile still firmly in place, Izuku takes the offered seat and takes out a notebook and pen from his black laptop bag. Putting them down on the console before them, he then bends to take out a thermos next. Izuku's smile turns slightly vindictive as Aizawa longingly stares at the freshly poured coffee. He raises an eyebrow, offering him the thermos. Got a mug? And as the plain black coffee pours into his mug, Shouter could concede that the brat wasn't all bad. If only just, Izuku yawns, watching the tail end of the cavalry battle. The coffee had evidently not been enough to keep him awake and focused throughout the first 2 rounds. Not beyond writing down any notes and observations on one's quirks and any strengths and weaknesses to expand upon, at any rate. There were just no surprises. Todoroki had narrowly won the obstacle race against Katsuki, and judging by the scoreboard most of 1A would make it to the 3rd round. Really, the only surprise had been the girl from support, and even her wackiness isn't able to keep him awake. Though, he figured talking to her would be a whole other matter. He stifles another yawn. If you're bored, don't bother coming back after lunch. He snaps around to Aizawa, who was looking at him instead of the battle. Izuku shrugs. It's not that it's not interesting, it's just, he vaguely waves at the center of the stadium. Predictable. What do you mean? Yamada has his eyebrows raised in confusion. Izuku looks at him for a moment before he leans back in his seat, stretching out his arms to work out the 𝐭𝐴𝐽𝐾𝐲. Most of 1B won't cut it. Not because they are bad, but they just lack experience. He taps his chin with a finger, contemplative. Someone from 1A will win, I think. Shinsu might get lucky and get to the semis or the final. Katsuki and Todoroki don't need luck, they'll make it for sure. From what I've seen, most of the girls who make it to the 1v1 battles should get to the quarterfinals unless they get really bad matchups, since their quirks are more versatile. It all depends on the pairings, though, he finishes, looking back at Yamada with a shrug. Yamada looks at him over the rim of his glasses, eyebrows raised. You sound awfully sure of yourself. Everyone gets things wrong sometimes, you know. True, Izuku concedes, smirking sharply. But I don't make it a habit, too much trouble, you know. There is a choked cough to their right, and they both turn to see Aizawa valiantly trying and failing to cover his chuckle with his capture weapon. Izuku's smirk grows smug. Knew I was growing on you. Izuku decides to take Aizawa up on his offer. So, after lunch, he makes his way towards the seats reserved for 1A, idly wondering how they'll react to his sudden presence, when he almost runs into Endeavor's back. He makes a split-second decision, glad for the man's broad frame, and ducks back behind the corner he just came from, pressing his back against the wall and straining his ears. He'd never quite learned to not be nosy. Are you still not done throwing your little temper tantrum, Shouto? It's not a tantrum. Todoroki's voice is as passive and flat as it always is, but underneath it and barely perceptible, there is a smoldering rage Izuku doesn't expect. He raises an eyebrow, crossing his arms over his chest as he continues to eavesdrop. I didn't create you for you to throw half your power to the wayside, boy. Izuku's BLD runs cold. You already know my answer to that, old man. There's the sound of retreating steps fading into the distance, angry growls from Endeavor, and then the hero, too, leaves. Izuku sighs, now alone in the hallway. I should have stuck with the league, less baggage. The class turns around to look at him as one, only missing Shinsu. Izuku guesses he's off to prepare for his fight against Monoma, and he'd bet good money that he'll win. Katsuki averts his gaze first, turning back to the field and shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Ida frowns. What are you doing here? It sounds accusatory, though the boy probably didn't intend it to. Izuku just shrugs and sits down in an empty seat in the front row, leaving one seat empty between him and Todoroki to his right. He figures he might as well give them all space. Aizawa told me to F off. Kaminari smirks. You that annoying. Very, He deadpans, but when he locks eyes with the other teen he can't help his smirk. In the arena, Shinsu and Monoma walk across the field towards each other, and he lets his voice sound a bit more genuine as he takes out a notebook and pen. Honestly, I think Aizawa just didn't want me to be bored. I barely managed to stay awake during the first 2 rounds. Izuku can see their faces from the corner of his eyes, so he amends, not really feeling up to his usual antagonism. I was mostly bored because I'm supposed to focus on your class and the first 2 rounds don't allow for much of that. I'm sure these 1v1 battles will be more interesting for me. Suddenly, Ashido moves her head out over his shoulder, looking at his notes with an interest he hadn't seen from her before. He startles. Who do you think will win? He looks back at the arena and frowns. Depends. If Shinsu figured out Monoma's quirk and gets him before they touch, he wins. It kinda depends on whether Monoma is an idiot, though. And it goes as he predicted, Shinsu exploiting Monoma's usual antics the moment midnight gives them the go-ahead. The blonde is out of bounds in under a minute and Izuku sighs. He watches Todoroki curb stomp Zero with a frown, worried despite himself. I didn't create you for you to throw half your power to the wayside, boy. The exchange repeats in his head, over and over, while Todoroki melts his classmate from the giant glacier of his own creation. Izuku stands, suddenly, startling the other teenagers. I'll be right back, he mutters distractedly, shoving his notebook and pen back into his laptop bag and slinging it over his shoulder, rushing up the stairs. Wait. Izuku pauses, turning back to Kirishima. At least tell us who you think will win the next round. He shrugs, already making his way up the stairs again. The girl from 1B. Her vines can serve as lightning rods, and Kaminari will fry his brain immediately. Back in the class seats, Shinsu raises an eyebrow. Is he really wearing a hoodie that reads "Villainous Cinnamon Roll"? His classmates' laughter is all the answer he gets. He manages to intercept Todoroki halfway between the arena exit and the class seats. Before the other teenager can even say anything, he grabs his left wrist and drags him to a nearby storage closet. Once the door is closed behind them, Todoroki finally speaks. What do you want? Izuku crosses his arms over his chest, locking eyes with him. For a moment, his gaze lingers on the scar covering half his face. Earlier, I overheard you and Endeavor. Todoroki frowns, and his usually passive voice gains an edge. Of course a villain would eavesdrop on private conversations. Go figure. There's nothing private about talking in a public hallway, Izuku shrugs, but doesn't deny the accusation of eavesdropping. It's not like he's wrong. What he mentioned. Endeavor bought your mom, didn't he? Something flashes in Todoroki's eyes, but it disappears almost as quickly as it came. Izuku can appreciate the kind of self-control that only comes with training or abuse. He has a good idea which one applies to Todoroki Shoto. Todoroki takes a deep breath, not meeting his eyes. It was a quirk marriage, if that's what you mean. Izuku nods, more to himself than for the others' benefit. I get why you don't want to use your left side, then. Todoroki's expression shifts in surprise, and he just uncrosses his arms and puts his hands in the pockets of his hoodie. I understand, maybe better than most, why you won't use the part of your quirk you got from him. Their eyes lock again, and something in Todoroki's gaze breaks Izuku's mask. He swallows, cursing his lapse in self-control. I was born quirkless. The villain who kidnapped me has the ability to take and give quirks at will, and he forced one onto me in an attempt to buy my loyalty. He breathes in, holds for 2, then releases for 2. When he continues, his voice is steadier. This quirk doesn't fit me, but even if it did, I wouldn't like using it if I could help it. It feels wrong, like I'm just giving him more control when I use it after all. Izuku steps towards Todoroki then, grabbing his shoulders. I'm not telling you to use it, because that would make me a hypocrite. In the end, I'm not using a power I see as evil, the same as you. But, he looks away for a moment, then meets his eyes again, frowning. Do you think it's fair to your classmates to hold back? Aren't you just giving Endeavor control over you in a different way, in the end? Todoroki frowns. What? Izuku likes his lip, taking back his hands and averting his eyes. You essentially act this way to spite him. So, in the end, your every action is influenced by the thought of him. His exerting control over you when all you want is to be free of him. I feel like this goes ways, then. Todoroki blinks at him like a cat, and Izuku almost laughs. Maybe, he concedes, slowly putting his mask back in place. He keeps his voice as genuine as he dares, opting to be sincere for at least the rest of their conversation. But I wasn't born with my quirk, was I? In the end, their little talk isn't enough to change Todoroki's mind about his fire, and Izuku hadn't expected it to. A conviction of years, born from so much resentment and abuse, can't be overcome by one short pep talk. Izuku still hopes it might help the other teenager down the line, though both of them make it back to Class 1A in time to see Hatsune step out of bounds to let Ida win, and judging from the dejected look on Kaminari's face, Izuku had been right about that particular matchup, too. Izuku sits back down, taking out his notebook and pen in preparation for Ashido's and Ayama's match to start. He flinches when his police-commissioned phone starts ringing in his bag, and he unlocks it to read Tsukochi's message with a frown. His BLD runs cold. What's the matter? Izuku jerks his head around, startled, and almost drops his phone. He thinks. Those kids were getting to him. He looks at Shinsu and shrugs, easily slipping his mask back on. Nothing much, just an update for an investigation I'm helping with. Izuku holds Shinsu's intense gaze, not giving an inch. After a few moments of staring, the other teen scoffs and turns back to the arena. USTB, one hell of an update. You look like you've seen a ghost. Izuku frowns and suppresses a curse. These kids and the way they were getting to him. Focusing back on his phone, he types a quick message to Aizawa, even if it was probably pointless. He doubts Tsukochi hadn't informed his prison warden, considering he'd been requested to help on site. Hosu, here I come, I guess. Izuku is sitting in the 1A classroom, ignoring the students while he once again sorts through the massive stacks of stapled and color-coded papers to make sure he hadn't forgotten any in his room. He is pretty sure his already cost UA 3 toner cartridges with the sheer amount of printing he'd done so far. But hey, as long as he's not paying, who cares? The bell rings and Aizawa comes in, the class quieting down immediately. Next week you'll all be going on internships. They'll only be 1 week long for now, as a sort of first taste of the real thing. He begins without preamble, blunt as ever. Some pros have extended offers to you depending on how you did in the festival, and I expect you to hand in your decision by the end of the week. Midoriya will now hand you your offers along with whatever Nezu made him do. You have the rest of the PRD to look through your paperwork. If you have questions, pester him, not me. With that, he slips inside his sleeping bag and goes to take a nap in a corner. Rolling his eyes at his antics, Izuku steps up to hand out the massive stacks, his voice unusually cheerful. Principal Nezu asked me to create portfolios analyzing your quirks. I went ahead and included possible ways you could use them that you might have not considered before, as well as potential support item additions for your costumes and which areas of your fighting style you should improve. Oh, he smirks as he hands Ida his stack, the corner of an envelope poking out from between the pages. I also highlighted the internships I think would be most beneficial to you and made notes on why I chose them, but the decision is obviously up to you. I was just bored. Tenya tries to meet Midoriya's eyes, but the villain, was he still a villain, even? Resolutely ignores him while he makes his way down the rows. You can always ask me about anything that's unclear in these notes, I have a habit of getting carried away. While Midoriya walks back to the front of the classroom, takes out his glasses and focuses on his laptop, essentially ignoring them all, Tenya fishes the envelope out from between the pages of his offers. Discreet as he can manage, he puts the envelope in his bag, opting to read it later. Because right now, he has to find a pro-hero stationed in Hosu. The boy wondered, sometimes, what made people turn to villainy. He had only ever known the dream of becoming a hero, after all. That dream had slipped out of his grasp for the first time when he was 4 and drove Tsubasa, who, he supposed, he learned he really wanted to punch in the face during the past 3 years of his new life, had diagnosed him as quirkless. But he didn't let his dream die. It had slipped further from his grasp when he was 10 and kidnapped by a supervillain bent on making him his right-hand man, for a reason the boy didn't understand. But he didn't let his dream die. It became a glimmer in the distance when he was 11 and killed a man. But he didn't let his dream die. His dream was the furthest from his mind when he locked eyes with the frightened girl with silver hair and a heart of gold, covered in bandages of scarlet and shaking. He let his dream die, then. Because what he decided when green met red was fundamentally opposed to heroism. What he decided was something only a villain could do. Midoriya looked up at Todoroki, who was clutching his internship offers in his hands. Yes. Why did you suggest them? The teenage villain raised an eyebrow. Well, you are quite strong offensively already. But considering certain, well, all things considered, using this week to intern with rescue heroes might be a good way to broaden your horizon, and the Pussycats are used to working with UA students. Your quirk could work very well in that environment. Heterochromatic eyes locked with Viridian, trying to parse any hint of lies, but found none. I will consider it. A blinding smile and closed eyes, voice chipper. That's all I ask. The interaction, however short, seemed to break the ice as some of the other students went up to their TA as well, much to his surprise. Why did you recommend Fat Gum, Midoriya-san? He looked at Yorozu with a frown. Your quirk utilizes your fat cells, same as his. It might be good to intern under someone with a similar quirk. What do you mean I shouldn't discharge my electricity? Midoriya rolled his eyes. You can't just be a one-hit wonder, Kaminari. If you electrify your body just right, about 50,000 volts should be enough. You can incapacitate villains by touching them. You'd basically be a walking taser. This went on for a few more students until a tense silence fell over the classroom when Bakugo stepped up to the front, a frown on his face. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, motioning him to speak up. Why Miko? He tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. Because she's pretty much you without the superiority complex. Waving his hand, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. She might be able to teach you a thing or 10 about anger management, too. Do you have to be like this? Green eyes snapped to him, and 1A was reminded of the person who had stood beside Shigaraki Tomura only a few weeks ago. His face was carefully blank sans the derisive smile that sent shivers down their spines, and his voice lacked all the playfulness they had come to expect from him. Be like what, Kaken? If you think I'll be perfectly civil to you, you're an idiot. Just because I take my work seriously, doesn't mean I'll sugarcoat my opinion of you. He stood up then, and his height didn't detract from his aura one bit. On my list of people I despise, you're only barely below the people who kidnapped me, so don't you dare expect anything but the bare minimum from me. Not after everything you did. The bell rang, then, and Midoriya put his laptop back in his bag, turning to leave. At the door he turned back, only slightly, his eyes two hard stones. You know, it's really something when villains aren't the ones to suicide bait a little quirkless kid, Katsuki. The others who were heading to Hosu had looked at him strangely when he opted to sit several rows away from them, but seemed to accept it as him needing space after what had happened to Tensai. Really, Tenya just wanted to think in peace, and read a certain letter without having to be afraid of others looking over his shoulder. The handwriting was just as precise and clean as he had seen the villain's notes to be during the sports festival. He appreciated that. Reading through it, Tenya had to make a conscious effort not to grip the sheets of paper too tightly. It took him several breaths to calm down enough to take out his phone, save the number mentioned in it, type out a message and hit send. Tenya always wanted to be like his big brother. He wondered what had gone wrong for him to find sympathy in a villain's words. I can't believe I have to deal with you wearing this ridiculous hoodie again, Midoriya. Viridian eyes twinkled in amusement at Shinsu's exasperated words. A smirk sent the disgruntled teen's way. Oh please, you love my hoodie. No, I really don't. And you claim you and Aizawa here aren't related. You can't fool me, you two. Quiet, you two, I want to nap. I already regret doing this. The teenagers looked at the teacher, sitting next to Shinsu and leaning against the window of the train looking every bit like a grumpy cat. Purple met green and they shrugged, leaning back in their seats. Izuku was about to mimic his warden, savoring the fact he had a double seat to himself, when he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Taking it out he looked at the message, and a tension he hadn't realized was there left his shoulders. The message was only 2 words, and he made sure to save the number, just in case. Thank you. Shigaraki Tomura wasn't a very patient man, nor did he like people very much. In truth, the only people he couldn't hate were his sensei and his only friend, who was like a little brother to him, Midoriya Izuku. And now his little brother was away. On a mission to spy for them, to try and make sure that nothing stood in their way to destroy this rotten society. It was strange, really. He had gotten so used to him being there, right beside him. There was something wrong without him there, with him missing. Where Shigaraki was impatient and crass, Midoriya was calm and polite. Where Shigaraki was violent and destructive, Midoriya was calculated and precise. And yet they had been inseparable, and it made the itch that was always there 1,000 times worse. He knew his missing little brother was part of why the meeting with the hero killer had gone so abysmally. If Midoriya had been there, ever the strategist with a maxed-out charisma stat, they could have come to an agreement. Or, at the very least, killed the dumb bastard. Standing atop the water tower with Kurogiri, he was inclined to think he would have preferred the later outcome, if only because Stain had rubbed him the wrong way. Kurogiri. Do you think Izuku would have wanted us to ally with Stain? He didn't really care for the Warp Gate's opinion, but his little brother told him that asking questions even if you didn't care for the answer was handy in getting people's loyalty, and he tried to listen to his advice. He was their tactician, after all. Hard to say, Shigaraki Tomura. I would like to think that he would have tried, if only to use him as a means to an end. Shigaraki hummed, mulling over those words. I guess. You can't have enough cannon fodder after all. Maybe Midoriya had a point when he said that there really weren't any stupid questions. His brother was always a natural at charisma, after all. Either I know what you are planning to do. I'm not going to tell you to let go of your hatred, because I have no right. The entire reason I am here, able to write this letter, is because my hatred for the League is big enough to betray them, after all. The sword of the hero killer shone in the dim light of the alleyway, catching his attention. You likely don't care for words of encouragement from a villain, and I won't hold it against you if you just ignore everything I tell you. I won't tell you not to go after the hero killer, not after what happened to Ingenium. There were explosions and screams in the distance, but the noise dulled as he clenched his fists, anger surging through him. I won't tell you to let go of your longing to avenge the hero your brother can no longer be, not when my longing to avenge the life I have lost is the only thing keeping me going each day. I will be in Hosu during your internship, working on the hero killer case. He took a deep breath as he took out his phone. If you come across Stain and decide to confront him alone, I ask that you send me your location. From one vengeful person to the other. He hit send, put his phone away, and surged forward. From one villain to another. The 3 of them had decided to split up, Aizawa and Shinsu in one direction and Midoriya in the other. I trust you enough not to get in trouble, unlike this suicidal hero in the making. I take offense to that. Figuring that between them and what Midoriya had discovered about Stain, the only one who'd actually be in danger would be the villain of the group. I still can't believe you took an intern without a license on this trip, Eraser. Izuku was running across the roofs of Hosu with ease, gaze trained on the dark alleys below him as he passed, right index finger on the communicator in his ear. I'd rather have the kid next to me where I can threaten him to stay safe. I'm much more concerned about your bad influence. The chance we'll run into the hero killer is pretty low. Me. A bad influence. Please. I might not have a license, but at least I have a fashion sense. Ouch, Shinsu, that hurt. And here I was going to get you a matching hoodie to go with your Gucci eye bags. A low, rumbled voice reached him through the comm link that sounded dangerously close to teenagers, and he had to suppress a chuckle, only to pause. Don't get attached, he reminded himself. Sighing, he was about to continue the way he had been heading when his phone vibrated in his pocket, and his BLD ran cold. He forgot that the comm link was still open when he read the message, a low, angry F, escaping him. What happened? If he'd been in a different state of mind, he might have detected the worry in the pro's voice, but instead he put his phone away, reaching for the communicator. Midoriya stomped on it, once, breaking it, before he turned right and ran across the rooftops with renewed vigor. Fing dumbass. Several miles away, Aizawa shouter cursed when static reached him through the comm link. He broke the communicator, didn't he? Shinsu deadpanned, and his teacher's litany of curses and promises to ground the Fing problem child till he was 30 were answer enough. He heard the hero killer before he saw him. His voice was raspy like sandpaper, but underneath it was a mania Izuku knew very well, had heard it in Tomura's voice plenty of times. That kind of voice was dangerous. Culling you will bring about a better world, fake. Izuku jumped from the two-story building before he'd really thought about it, and only years of training made sure he landed safely and soundlessly in a crouch behind Stain, hands pilfering 2 blades from the murderer's back. He rose, roundhouse kicking Stain in the back and away from Ida in one fluid motion, hands readjusting the blades to get a better grip. While I appreciate the aesthetic, I have to ask that you leave my student alone. His voice didn't match his words, a cold fury in it that he rarely let show. Ida, can you move? No. Ever since he cut me, I've been paralyzed. His voice was wet and angry, and Izuku felt the need to both help him and kick him in the face for being an idiot. This is my revenge, just leave. No offense, Ida, but your revenge failed when he beat you. Not daring to look away from the hero killer and his katana, he took a few careful steps forward, wishing he had more on him than jeans, a hoodie, and 2 daggers. He preferred guns, really. And who are you? Another fake. A green. Eyebrow shot up, a practiced, fake smirk curling his lips. Me. No, I'm no hero. I gave that up when I was 13. Izuku shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant but finding it hard to keep the fury from his voice. Nah, I'm just a teenage villain trying to make amends, is all. Stain's crimson eyes narrowed, zeroing in on the quirk-suppressant collar around his neck. And what are you going to do, without a quirk? He felt his smirk become slightly unhinged as he ducked into a battle stance, letting the small part of him that All for One had reached, had corrupted beyond help take over. I don't need a quirk to kill a washed-up vigilante. Ida felt incredibly foolish, lying on the cold ground as the man who had planned the USJ attack, had made the plan to kill All Might, had been slowly weaseling his way into their class in some weird way he still couldn't quite understand, faced down the hero killer with nothing but 2 short daggers and a Hail Mary. In a way, he had come to appreciate the sarcastic teenager, he supposed, even before the letter he had written him. Thought he might have been his friend, under different circumstances, in a different life. But watching him now, a mania in his green eyes that was unlike yet alike the hero killer's, he wondered if he'd even gotten close to knowing him at all. Izuku bent back, the katana sweeping through the air mere inches above his face, and kicked at Stain's face as he did a backflip to get out of reach again. His shoe missed Stain's chin by a breath, and he cursed. The hero killer watched him, gauging his next move, and he had to resist the urge to rush forward. Tomura had rubbed off on him. Why do you even care about this fake? Back to talking, here. I told you, he's my student. He crossed the daggers in front of him just in time to block the katana, gritting his teeth. That's not the real reason, is it? He felt a spiked booth kick him in the side, and he flew back, hitting the alley wall with a low grunt, ducking the next sword swing only barely. You're not the type to care about something like that. Izuku kicked at Stain's left knee, knocking him to the ground, only for the killer to roll backwards and into a crouch, lunging forward again. You got me there. Throwing the daggers into the air, he grabbed for Stain's wrists, raising them above his head and kicking him in the stomach. He twisted the katana from the slack grip, twirling to slash at his gut but meeting only air. Izuku turned, locking eyes with the breathing hero killer a few feet away. Tell me, what do you think is the reason I am here? I wonder. Stain moved his hands in a blur, and Izuku moved a second too late, one of the throwing knives cutting across his left eye, pain blooming across. He discarded the katana and lunged for the small knife, grabbing it and rolling to the side, aggravating the bleeding in his right side and grunting in pain. His world was tinged crimson, and he hoped cutting didn't suffice to paralyze a victim. The katana came down, pressing him into the ground as he barely held it at bay with the far too short blade in his right hand. Do you think saving this fake wannabe hero will save you? People don't change, fake stays fake, villain stays villain. Perhaps, Izuku grit his teeth, trying to focus Stain's attention on him as he slowly moved his left hand. I resigned to my fate a while ago. That doesn't mean I can't still try to do good when I have the chance. You're just meddling in things that don't concern you. Well, I've heard that's what heroes do, not that I think I'll ever be one anymore. He relished the slight surprise in the hero killer's eyes, the fingers of his left hand finding the hilt of another dagger and slashing at his face. Stain jerked away, wildly moving his katana as the mask over his eyes was cut off. Stained in blood, Izuku bit his tongue and broke its skin as he suppressed a scream of pain, his right index finger cut off by the ragged blade. They stumbled to their feet, both bloody and out of breath. Above the sound of his heartbeat he thought he heard shouts and hurried footsteps, and when he dared to follow Stain's gaze, the killer already aiming with another handful of throwing knives, he moved without thinking for the second time that night. Behind him, Stain threw the knives at Aizawa and Shinsu standing at the end of the alleyway, simultaneously moving to like at the blood on the katana. The first thing he felt were 3 short blades embedding in his back. The second thing he felt was Stain's quirk paralyzing him, his body freezing mid-run. The third thing he felt were Aizawa's arms catching him. Izuku fell unconscious amidst a chorus of shouted voices and pain. Hope is a fickle thing. In darkest times, hope can be the only thing that keeps you going, and at first the boy clings to it. He is 10 and alone and hoping for a hero to save him. But a hero never comes. Pain is a dangerous thing. It can keep you grounded when around you the world is blurring, and at first the pain keeps the boy tethered to reality. He is 10 and alone and prays for the pain to stop. But the pain never stops. The boy wants to scream but his voice has left him. Sensei tells him the pain is his own fault. If only the boy would learn, would accept that heroes and light mean pain and suffering, and only him and the League can make it stop, make him strong, set him free. One day the pain stops. He is 10 and no longer alone when a large hand threads through his damp hair. Where is your home? With the League. Who saved you? Sensei. He is 10 when he learns that help will never come. He is 10 when he learns that control is all that matters. He is 10 when he learns to weave a mask and a role to give him control. He is 10 when he learns that hope is for the weak. Hope is a fickle thing. Pain is a dangerous thing. Control is certainty. Shinsu watches Midoriya take 3 blades for Eraserhead and him without a moment's hesitation, and something in him snaps. His voice is steadier than he feels as he shouts. Hey, you thing butt. The hero killer looks at him and snarls, and Shinsu latches onto his mind the moment the first sound escapes the man's lips, crimson eyes turning dull. He holds fast to his mind control while his teacher gently lowers their TA to the ground, trying not to look at the other teen's bleeding wounds. It had only been 10 minutes since they had run after Midoriya, following Aizawa's phone to the collar's location, but the alley looked like the battle had gone on for much longer than that. Good work, Shinsu. Aizawa murmurs beside him, his capture weapon surging forward and wrapping Stain in a hold that seemed slightly tighter than it needed to be. He felt his control slip, but before the hero killer could regain his bearings his teacher had kicked him hard in the side of his head, knocking him out cold. Their eyes met briefly, and Aizawa quickly focused on helping Ida up, who seemed surprised that he could move again, while Shinsu moved to look at the downed pro-hero in the corner. That seemed unusually brutal of you, Sensei, he muttered while bandaging Native's bleeding shoulder. Perhaps. He heard his classmate grunt in pain as their teacher steadied him to help him walk out of the alleyway, requesting an ambulance and cop car with the app on his phone, frown on his face. I've never taken injured children well. Shinsu smirked, moving to help the barely conscious pro to his feet. Yamada-sensei is right, you're a real softie. If you don't want to suffer detention, you better shut up now, kid. Aizawa passed him on his way out of the alley, carefully lifting the unconscious villain in his arms to carry him to the main street. Gently leaning him against a wall so that the wound on his side and the knives in his back weren't aggravated, he began to clean and bandage the teen's hand. How did Midoriya know where to find you, Ida? Ida flinched, the blood leaving his face. I sent him my location. Shinsu raised an eyebrow as he grabbed the end of the capture weapon and unceremoniously dragged Stain out onto the street, then turned to his friend to bandage his shoulder. How did you get his number, Ida? Ida sighed, averting his gaze. He gave it to me, said to send him my location if I come across the hero killer. Blue eyes came to rest on the unconscious teenager, and he bit his lip. I didn't think he'd come alone. Shin-Su cuffed him upside the head, ignoring his indignant glare. Of course he came alone, dumbass. He even broke his comm link. What? Why? I would have had to order him to refrain from engaging Stain. Aizawa's voice drifted to them, the man busy with the teen's head wound. By destroying the comm link he's able to claim it was an accident, and didn't have to choose between leaving you at Stain's mercy and opposing my orders. Before Ida could say more, they heard sirens behind them, the cop car being the first to arrive and the officers wasting no time in putting the knocked-out hero killer in cuffs, handing the capture weapon back to Aizawa. They were about to search him for weapons when a loud screech sounded above their heads. In a flash, Eraserhead was in the claws of a flying 𝐂𝐵, quickly getting carried away. Shin-Su cursed, then followed a green blur barreling past him. Midoriya, steadier on his legs than should be possible, grabbed one of the cop's guns with his bandaged hand. He hissed as he had to resort to placing his middle finger on the trigger. Midoriya aimed, hands impossibly still, rapidly firing 4 shots at the retreating 𝐂𝐵. Shin-Su barely managed to catch the teenage villain, the burst of energy leaving him as quickly as it had appeared. The 𝐂𝐵 crashed behind them, and it seemed to free the rest of the people around them from a trance. The owner of the gun quickly took it back from Midoriya's slack grip, the other running towards the downed mutant and the pro-hero slowly coming back to his feet. Are you alright, Eraserhead? Yeah, came his teacher's grumpy reply, his gaze trained on the 𝐂𝐵's brain. Who shot? It was Midoriya, sensei. That was Ida, walking over to help Shin-Su with the surprisingly heavy body of their TA. Their teacher's eyes went wide, his eyes coming to rest on the teenager with a missing finger and an eye covered in gauze. You're trying to tell me that he took a cop's gun, aimed at a flying target's brain, and hit it 4 times in a close cluster in that condition? Shin-Su and Ida looked at each other, then down at the unconscious madman in their arms. Looking back at their teacher, all they could do was shrug. Aizawa groaned, loudly, rubbing a hand across his face. I'm too old for this SHT. Izuku groaned as he groggily opened his right eye, his left eye covered in a large patch. The lights above him stabbed at his nerves, a pounding headache and nausea washing over him. The next thing he felt was a numb throb in his right hand, his side and his back, and for a moment he wondered if he'd been run over by a train. Finally awake, kid. He turned his head to the voice by his side, and blinked. Eraser! The pro-hero seemed tired, but lacked his custom frown and exasperation. Instead, he looked at Izuku with something like relief. You scared us, there. You've been asleep for almost 24 hours. Aizawa shook his head. Never again do something like this, I am too young for grey hairs and a heart attack. It took him a moment, but the memories came rushing back, fuzzy but whole. With a start he attempted to sit up, but firm, gentle hands grabbed his shoulders and pressed him back into the mattress. Don't rush, you will just aggravate your stitches, kid. Izuku frowned, he most definitely was not pouting, and glared at his warden. Is everyone alright? Aizawa scoffed and rolled his eyes, leaning back in the shitty plastic chair beside his bed. You're the only one with any permanent injuries, kid. I hope it was worth it to lose a finger and gain a bunch of scars. He shrugged, moving his one-eyed gaze to the ceiling, looking at nothing in particular. I mean, the finger SCKS will make shooting a gun kinda hard. But I've had worse wounds, and a few more scars don't really matter. Izuku smirked then. Should a hero and teacher really ask if saving a kid and a pro was worth IW? Eraserhead had hit him over the head, glaring. It is not your job to risk your life, you idiot. Well, better my life than someone who's got some worth left. The two of them glared at each other, and Izuku thought that the only reason Eraserhead had yet to beat him up was his condition. No one is worthless, kid. The older man grabbed his right hand, carefully, and it felt weird to be missing a finger in the grip. What you did was stupid and thoughtless, but I want to thank you. What you did was very heroic. Later on, Izuku would blame it on the pain meds they were giving him because really, the prose words shouldn't have affected him as they did. He had long since given up on being a hero, was planning things that were as opposed to heroism as he dared. He would blame it on his own recklessness, getting as attached and involved as he had. As Izuku cried, he felt Aizawa gently move to embrace him, helping him sit up, and he wasted no time in returning the hero's hug, his bandaged face pressed in the older man's shoulder. He wanted to thank him, that tiny part of him he had failed to snuff out growing warm at his words, but his voice failed him. But it didn't matter, because Aizawa seemed to know regardless as he rubbed his back soothingly. Once he had calmed down, and Eraserhead had moved him to be sat propped up against a pillow, the man regarded him for a moment, before he asked, an eyebrow raised. "Now, I want you to be honest, were those just lucky shots?" That made Izuku pause and tilt his head, at a loss for words. Of course they weren't. Shooting when you aren't sure you'll hit your target is fing stupid. He shrugged, thankful that the medications had reduced his pain to a low throb as the stitches in his back strained slightly. It was a bit hard to focus with my injured eye and having to fire with my middle finger, but it wasn't that difficult. Aizawa rubbed his face with his right hand, a low chuckle escaping the tired man. Of course you'd know how to shoot a gun, why am I even surprised? Well, I like guns, is it that would I know how to use them? It's weird that a 15-year-old likes guns in the first place. Well, rifles are cooler than guns, but I rarely get the opportunity to use them, so, now the teacher seemed even more exasperated than before, and leveled him with an incredulous look. You have used a sniper rifle. Another shrug and a bright green eye that was clueless and more open than he would have let it be if he was in a clear state of mind. Sniping is fun. Oh my god. Yes, later on he would decide to blame the meds, but he wouldn't find it in himself to be mad about it. Because as he watched the usually stoic Eraserhead, for lack of a better word, facepalm, he couldn't help the laughter bubbling up from inside. Once alone, he would pause to wonder when he'd last laughed genuinely, without a mask and without cynicism, and he'd realize that he couldn't remember. And he'd decide that it didn't matter. Not when he suddenly felt warm hands at his neck, and a weight he had gotten used to disappear as the coldness of his quirk returned from its hibernation. Wide green eyes met a bloodshot black gaze, a small, genuine smile playing at the hero's lips as he removed the suppressant collar from him and put it away. Izuku's left, uninjured hand shot up, rubbing at the sore skin of his throat. Aizawa's smile became a fraction wider, his right hand coming up to ruffle green locks. I've decided to trust you, problem child. Ida and Shinsu visited him next, the former boy looking guilty as he took in his patched-up eye and hand missing a finger. Izuku smiled at them, beckoning Ida closer before hitting him over the head with a fist, ignoring Shinsu's snicker. You're a fing idiot. I know. Huffing, Izuku crossed his arms over his chest, frowning. And here I hoped you'd be straight-laced enough the letter would convince you to not be an idiot. Ida looked at him, confused. In your letter, you said you understood — I did, he interrupted. And I still do, Ida. Nevertheless, what you were planning wasn't heroic, it was villainous. You used your quirk without a license to harm someone else. If it wasn't for Eraserhead and me lying through our teeth, you'd be kicked out of UA and on your way to juvie, you dumbass. Izuku sighed and rubbed his mangled hand through his hair. Did you, at any point, think how that would make your brother feel? At all. Did you really think he'd want you to die avenging him? I wrote that letter hoping that getting compared to a villain would snap you out of it. Ida gaped at him, and the two hero students watched as their TA growled, glaring at him. I can't believe you made me break my streak. Only 2 more weeks and I'd have had a new record. I was so close to 8 months without being wrong, you better make up for this, Ida. Shinsu was the first to snicker, then full-on laugh, closely followed by his friend and the injured villain. Yes, Izuku decided. He wouldn't be mad that he let them see this side of him. He had seen his mother once after he had been kidnapped, when he was 12 and watching a hero fight to gather intel on a target. His distinct hair was covered by the hood of his sweater, black medical mask covering half his face. He looked entirely unremarkable among the throngs of people watching the fight between one of Endeavor's sidekicks and some minor villain the boy hadn't bothered to remember. When the fight was almost over and the boy was satisfied with the information he had gathered, he turned away, making his way back the way he'd come. He had only been walking for a little while, the crowd becoming thinner the further he went from the fight. And then he saw her. She was paler than he remembered, her face worn from sorrow and mourning. But it was her, and for a cruel second he let the hope he'd snuffed out wake again, his heart constricting painfully in his chest. He could go back. He could see his mom again. He would be free. Without him meaning to, he had walked towards her, 2 years of training ingrained enough that he didn't look suspicious following the woman home from grocery shopping. Then he stopped, his body turning cold. What was he doing? They had found him on his way home from school. They had taken him in broad daylight. They would hurt her. All for one would educate him again. Every scar on his body burned with a fire that scorched him to the marrow of his bones. No, he decided, and turned around. He was tainted. He was dangerous. He had killed. And he wouldn't drag her down to hell with him. Izuku. The teenager smiled as his mother greeted him at the door, embracing her in a bone-crushing hug. Sorry I'm late, I got distracted by work. Teary Viridian eyes sparkled at him, her smile as bright as the sun. It's fine, Izuku, I know you must be busy with the work for the heroes and that class of yours. Remind me to never become a teacher, Mom, final exams are next week and I am dead. Been trying to convince Aizawa to loan me one of his sleeping bags. He half joked. It had been awkward at first, seeing his mother again, and she hadn't really been sure how to treat him, too afraid to remind him of his past. She motioned him to the living room. I'm so glad you are finally off probation and can go as you please. Though, I'm still sad you aren't back home with me for good. Izuku threw her an apologetic smile as he sat down on the couch. It's just safer for everyone if I stay at UA. Especially for you. He took the tea from her gratefully, blowing at it. I know, I still miss you. Well, now that I am an officially redeemed villain, I can visit more often. His mother frowned from over her own cup. It's disgraceful that they thought you were a villain in the first place, Izuku. I can't believe it took you getting hurt while protecting one of the kids to stop being suspicious of you. Her green eyes flicked to the scar over his left eye, one he, admittedly, quite liked. It was a scar he had chosen to risk getting, after all, and then to the awkward way he held his teacup with his right hand, the index missing. Well, I've murdered and been an accessory to murder, even if under duress. He shrugged, taking a sip from his tea and setting the cup down on the coffee table, rubbing the finger stumps subconsciously. It was a precaution, and I understand why they did what they did. Still, trying to get her off the topic, he nudged her slightly, smirking. So, what's for lunch? A bright smile made its way on her face almost immediately, and she jumped up to get to the kitchen. Katsudon, of course. I prepped everything and just need to cook everything and, oh dear. I don't think that's enough rice for the two of us, since I wanted to make extra to take back to UA for you. She went to the Gen-Con to put her shoes on. I'll run to the store real quick, I should be back in 15. Izuku frowned at her from over the back of the couch. Mom, I can dash nonsense. With that she was out the door, and Izuku huffed in amusement. She hadn't changed one bit. His eyes flickered to the house phone, and he bit his lip. Shooting a quick look back to the door, he jumped up and grabbed the phone, dialing the last burner phone number he remembered. Yes. The voice was terse and grumpy, and Izuku wondered what had gotten his panties in a twist this time. It's me. Izuku. I'm so glad you're alright. The heroes aren't hurting you, are they? Rolling his eyes, he leaned against the wall. Of course not, Tomini. They had me under surveillance until recently, but I've got their trust now, so I get to walk around. Had to find a phone that wasn't being traced though, so delete this number when we're done. A huff. I'm not an idiot. No, but you get distracted easily, Tomini. You're none to talk, Aizu. Tuche. So, what's the tea? The Fing Hero Killer. I got a bunch of wannabes in the bar that wanna join us cause of him and it just, Izuku could hear the scratching over the phone and grimaced. Are you using that cream I got you? Sometimes. Get Krogiri to remind you, since I can't babysit you anymore, He made his voice purposefully joking, though he was having a hard time not groaning in frustration. How is he older than me? Fine. So, the hero killer. Can't say I like the guy, cost me a literal finger fighting him. There was silence on the other end, then a low growl. If he wasn't in Tartarus, I'd disintegrate him limb for limb. Or, love you too, Tomini. But alas, he is in Tartarus, so no dice, I'm afraid. But now that his ramblings are connected to us, we can use them to our advantage. Better direct this fallout before it gets out of hand. We already planned to F up society, and he wanted to kill heroes to reform society, so just use his message to lure in a bunch of impressionable NPCs and eventually, when they've proven loyal, feed them more, make them see that it's not just the heroes that need to go, but everything. You're smart, Tomini, I'm sure you can do it. Thanks, Aizu. You always manage to make everything seem so much easier. That's my job, isn't it? Make your life easier so you can focus on the big battles. Still, thanks. Hear from you soon. I'll try. They haven't given me much confidential information that would help the League yet. Don't worry. They hung up then, and Izuku quickly deleted the number from the phone. I hope this doesn't come to bite me in the butt later. It was his first week back to teaching at UA, busy as he had been recovering and finishing up the hero killer case, then picking up all the paperwork and exam prep Aizawa didn't want to do, and still ended up looking over anyways. He wonders if his extended absence from class had been a way for the man to gauge how he'd act after having his freedom once more, but when he enters the classroom, he thinks it was more for the students' benefit. A hush settles over the other teenagers when they see the scar cutting over his left eye and through his eyebrow, and he notices their eyes following the movement of his right hand as he puts down his laptop bag, the missing finger quite evident in the way he grabs the strap. Morning. A murmured chorus responds, and he isn't sure why his injuries seem to shake them as much as they appear to. Izuku didn't think the students had taken any actual liking to him, merely been tolerating him out of necessity. For all he knew, he was still a villain in their eyes, even if Ida and Shinsu seemed to have warmed up to him in the way only battle can, so why did his injuries matter? Sitting down, he begins to take out his laptop and notebook again, planning to do some final revisions on the practical exam plans when he hears shuffling from the students. Izuku turns away from his bag, Ida and Yorozu suddenly standing in front of him with matching bashful expressions. Yes. The two exchange a glance before Yorozu holds out a black paper bag to him. How he'd failed to notice it before, he hadn't a clue. This is from us, the entire class, I mean. Izuku made no move to accept the bag, instead looking at the two class representatives with open confusion. What? Ida chopped with his right hand, a slight blush on his face. We, as a class, want to thank you for all the work you've done for us, and for saving me and Aizawa-sensei in Hosu. He bows deeply. Please accept this small token of gratitude. His eyes flicker back to the bag in Yorozu's hand, then back to them and the rest of the class behind them. Are you? I'm not sure. I don't know what to say, actually. How about thanks? Came Shinsu's lazy drawl from the back, and Izuku couldn't help a sheepish grin. He took the bag with a muttered thanks, feeling oddly apprehensive as he opened it and took out the soft, teal fabric inside, his smile turning into an incredulous smirk and a raised eyebrow as he unfolded the hoodie. Does this really say villainous green bean? The chopping returned. Your old hoodie was destroyed by the hero killer, we thought you might want a new one. Do you like it, brat? 21 pairs of eyes turned to the doorway to meet Aizawa's sleepy figure, coffee mug in hand. They asked me for your size, you know. Izuku turned back to the hoodie, then he looked at the class of students he didn't think even liked him in the first place, and his smirk turned into a watery smile. Yeah, I do. Thanks guys. A small part of him twinged at the thought that none of this should affect him the way it does. This wasn't something he deserved. Izuku sat next to Recovery Girl in the observation room a week later, wearing his new hoodie and notebook and pen in hand. His feet rested on the banister, ignoring the old nurse's annoyed glare as he looked over his notes again. So, that was Soto and Kirishima, fail, Asui and Tokoyami, pass, Ojuru and Ida, pass, next is... Yorozu and Shinsu against Aizawa, right? That's gonna be fun. With them were Asui, Ida, and Todoroki, who had decided to watch their classmates' exams. Asui tapped her right index finger to her chin as she watched her two classmates enter the residential cityscape. Our matchups made sense, but how is Sensei their greatest enemy, Kiro? The TA leaned back in his chair, his hands behind his head. Yorozu has been having confidence issues since the sports festival, since she feels like she should be doing better as a recommendation student. She is quick to lose her head when she can't rely on her quirk. Shinsu, on the other hand, sees Aizawa as a sort of mentor because he wants to become an underground hero like him. He also has a history of quirk discrimination, so he is reluctant to work with people he views as having been pampered or being privileged. He spares them a glance. We almost matched her up with you, Todoroki, but decided against it. Just then the intercom announced the start of the exam, and he focused back on the screens and comm-link, hand ready to write down his notes. So, what do you propose we do, Shinsu-kun? They were running along the narrow streets of the cityscape, eyes trained on the roofs in search for their teacher. Her partner scowled at her over his shoulder, then focused back on the streets ahead. Why are you asking me? You're the recommendation student. Yorozu frowned. What does that have to do with anything? Shouldn't you be better than me? Shinsu-kun, what's the matter? You're never like this with the others. He whirled around and she almost ran into him, taken aback by his glare. I don't really care about getting along with little pampered know-it-alls who've been born with a silver spoon shoved down their throat. I'm not Dash, oh please, you're some rich guy's brat who got everything she ever wanted the moment it struck her fancy. You have no clue what it's like to get thrown into foster care the moment your quirk manifests, or get a muzzle strapped to you, or have caretakers attempt to cut your tongue off so you can't use your evil quirk on them, so spare me your excuses, Vice Pres. Is this really the time and place for this? Their eyes widen at the sound of their teacher's voice, and Shinsu shoves her aside just in time to be the only one wrapped up in Aizawa's capture weapon. Get out of here. Back in the observation room, Izuku watches the other students' reactions, surprised Shinsu snapped so quickly. Perhaps he shouldn't have been, considering his idol was their proctor for the exam. Still, he hadn't expected it to go downhill so quickly. I didn't know he had it so bad, Ida whispered to his left. He and Asui seemed slightly green in the face, though it was hard to tell in the low lighting. Did you know about it, Todoroki-chan? Mismatched eyes looked at his friends, and he shrugged. I had some suspicions. Quirks bring out the worst in people, sometimes. Izuku snorted. That's a nice way to put it. As Yorozu is running, it feels as if her brain is both overflowing and devoid of thought. What am I supposed to do? Did Shinsan Eva say anything I can believe happened or God empathetize? She stopped, abruptly, her chest burning for oxygen. Closing her eyes, she slapped herself, hard, across the face. What the hell was she doing? She was training to be a hero, and instead of helping her classmate she was running away like a headless chicken. Shinsu hadn't even hesitated to push her out of the way, getting captured in her stead. She was hopeless, wasn't she? Shinsu watches his homeroom teacher warily as he puts eye drops into his eyes, dangling from a street lamp inside his capture weapon like a grumpy pinata. You surprise me, Shinsu. Normally, Shinsu would use the opportunity to snark, but his idol had wisely gagged him with part of the weapon, so instead he only raises an unimpressed purple eyebrow. For someone hell-bent on proving people wrong, you seem to have internalized a lot of what has been said about you and let your resentment dictate your actions. Black, red-rimmed eyes regard him in what must have looked bored to a stranger, but he could tell his teacher was disappointed, and it made cold dread pool in his stomach. I really expected better from you. He watches Aizawa jump atop a rooftop and run away, presumably looking for his partner, and Shinsu sagged in his confines. I'm hopeless, aren't I? So caught up in his own self-pity, Shinsu didn't realize that he was being lowered to the ground at first, until his gaze snapped to the left, watching wide-eyed as Yorozu was struggling to lower him gently, fighting against both his weight and the finicky nature of the capture weapon. When his feet finally touch the ground, the lack of tension makes the fabric around him sag, and he quickly moves out of it and removes the cloth around his face. You came back. Yorozu looks startled at his tone. Of course. What kind of person would just leave their partner behind? Shinsu snorts disbelievingly. After how I treated you. Most everyone. He expected many things then, but certainly not one of the most reserved and polite members of their class to walk up to him and slap him hard across the face. Now listen to me. I don't claim to understand what you went through. Quite honestly, what you said was horrifying and I can't blame you for being resentful after living through all that. But, she grabs the front of his costume then, and his wide lilac eyes meet her black ones, determined and hard. I had nothing to do with any of what you went through, and I don't deserve your judgment or resentment. You are my classmate and I would like to at least have a cordial relationship with you. So SCK it up long enough to get through this exam or I will knock you out and drag you through the gate, okay? Izuku lets out an impressed whistle, glasses sliding down his nose and stopping precariously on the tip. DMN girl, he says, exaggerating the curse and dragging it out in a bad Whoopi Goldberg impression. Tell him. Are you serious right now? Recovery girl scolds from his left, though a slightly amused smirk plays at her lips, and Izuku can't help but snicker, while the students just watch them in confusion, unable to hear what the students and proctors are saying. What did she say, Kiro? Who knows? Their tea muses in a sing-song voice, writing his glasses again and scribbling something in his notebook. Maybe she was telling him the compounds of the human body. But she can only create inorganic compounds. Ida replies with a hand chop, and Izuku looks at him with a blank expression, an eyebrow raised. Why am I not surprised that you didn't get the joke? Shaking his head he turns back to the monitors, watching as Shinsu and Yorozu commiserate on a way to win the exercise. Uncultured swine. Aizawa was perched on a roof near the exit gate like a vengeful gremlin, the remnants of his capture weapon floating around him as he watched the various streets for a sign of either of his students. He wondered if Yorozu had gotten a grip on herself and if so, if she had gotten Shinsu out of his bind and managed to get him to cooperate. Can't believe the problem child was right, again. He jumps to attention when he sees a hooded figure make its way down a side street, capture weapon surging forward. So Yorozu had abandoned Shinsu and was trying to negate his quirk. Clever, but it left her blind, too. A female gasp escaped the figure as the weapon wrapped around his student. He was secretly glad she tried to make it alone, since he didn't have enough of the cloth left for two people after capturing Shinsu. That wasn't so bad, Yorozu, but I'm afraid this is the end. He uses his hidden knife to cut away at the hood covering her face, only to have his eyes widen behind his glasses as Shinsu's face comes into view, or what little was visible behind his voice changer and reflective sunglasses. Sorry, sensei, comes Yorozu's voice from the brainwasher. But I disagree. The last thing he sees is a bright light as Shinsu drops a matryoshka-shaped flash grenade from underneath the hood, his hands having remained unfortunately unbound. Then he feels electricity surging through him from a point in his neck, seizing his muscles and bringing him to his knees, loosening the capture weapon enough for Shinsu to escape. He feels slender arms wrap around his neck in a chokehold and realizes too late that Shinsu had lured him to a spot that left his back to an area that he hadn't been able to watch as well from his perch, the realization hitting him just a second too late to prevent Shinsu from putting the cuffs on him. While he was secretly proud of his students, he really resented their use of a flash grenade. His poor eyes. Todoroki isn't entirely sure what he was supposed to expect from being partnered with Bakugo, of all people, to fight All Might for his exam. Midoriya's words echo in his mind as he makes his way to the gate where Bakugo was already waiting for him. We almost matched her up with you, Todoroki, but decided against it. Why though? Just because he was a recommendation student too. And if that was it, what would pairing him with Bakugo accomplish, that would have occurred paired with Yorozu as well? He would definitely have been useless without his quirk, and he wasn't sure it would be of much help against All Might even if his father would love to believe otherwise. Unlike his father, he knew when a fight was hopeless, and two half-baked teenagers would never make it against the number one, handicap or no. He knew that very well. His eyes widened and he almost faltered as realization hit. He knew that, but did Bakugo? Bakugo, who listened to no one and thought common sense and survival instinct were ice cream flavors. who thought retreat was a coward's strategy and who always wanted to win, only accepted total, brutal victory in accordance with his own rules, no one else's. Bakugo, who wouldn't view this exam passed without a complete, undisputable beatdown of All Might. Oh God, Todoroki murmured, fully aware his earpiece already picked up sound. I have to somehow evade All Might and drag an exploding maniac out of the arena. I hate everything. Unbeknownst to him, one Midoriya Izuku fell off his chair in the observation room, giggling like an idiot and wheezing a strangled have fun with Katsuki as his classmates watch on, puzzled. Took you long enough, icy hot. Todoroki eyed Bakugo warily, wondering if speaking up would be wasted breath. In the end, he thought that it couldn't hurt to at least try and extend an olive branch. Who knows, maybe he was wrong. We should probably run to the exit as fast as possible. Are you a dumbass, or did your quirk just melt and freeze your last couple brain cells? Okay, he wasn't wrong. Thing swell. He had taken to a rather unrefined language within the safety of his thoughts, if only to revel in the knowledge his father's attempts to make him speak all proper had failed. Natsuo had once called him a petty beach and he wasn't wrong usually. He tried not to rise to bait like that, but Todoroki figured that, at least this once, he would try to speak to Bakugo in the one language he seemed to understand, angry Pomeranian. Okay, listen, I get that your common sense died sometime during your CNCPTN, but even someone as dense and suicidal as you should know that we have as much of a chance to beat the number one as there is a chance of it raining diamonds from the sky. Somehow his little speech had stunned Bakugo into silence, and as he idly wondered if he should do this more often the gates opened, and with a sigh he walked forward. There goes nothing. Somewhere around a third into the cityscape Bakugo caught up with him, grabbing his arm and dragging him into a side street. Raising one unimpressed white eyebrow, Todoroki crossed his arms in front of his chest and leaned against the wall. What? I think that was the most you've said all year, icy hot. Rolling his mismatched eyes he pushed off the wall, making for the exit only to get stopped by Bakugo's grip again. What? Now listen here, you TWK-looking beach. Obviously we can't beat All Might, I think no, but... Should I be more offended that he called me a TWK, a beach or an butt? That's why we think need to distract him long enough that one of us can get out of the dumb gate. Todoroki blinked, taken aback by the fact that not only did Bakugo apparently not intend to go on a suicide mission, but actually considered working with him. Here. Just then a powerful gust of wind soared down the main street, and if they hadn't been standing in a side street it would have blown them right out of the exam grounds. Oh man, Izuku whined as he listened to the audio feed. That's not fair, Katsuki isn't supposed to do teamwork. Isn't that the whole point of the team-up, problem child? Asui, Ida, Uraraka, and Shinsu jumped at Aizawa's sudden presence, but Izuku only tilted his chair back, head bent to look at his former warden's face upside down. Yeah, but I fully expected Katsuki not to manage. Aizawa raised an eyebrow. You intended for him to fail. Expectations don't imply intentions. I'd like to think he's grown up since elementary school, but I'm not holding my breath. The teenager turned back to the monitors, frowning as he watched the two examinees make their way towards the exit gate by using alleys and avoiding the main street in case another gust of wind was sent their way. The homeroom teacher watched his TA closely, arms crossed over his chest. You resent Bakugo? Thing duh. Not for the past. Well, you do, but you resent him more so for what happened after you were abducted, don't you? Izuku's shoulders tense. And even with the unnatural, flickering light of the monitors Aizawa can see a steel in his eyes that sends a shiver down his spine. When he speaks, his voice is so devoid of emotion he wonders if he's overstepped. If you are implying that I somehow find it more reprehensible that Katsuki went into therapy after I disappeared than having him tell me to jump off a bridge, then I have to wonder if I was wrong about you after all. So you did know about his therapy? Of course, Sensei was quite eager to tell me all about it. How my childhood bully was getting therapy to deal with the fact his favorite target disappeared right after he suicide baited him, dealing with the guilt of maybe being responsible for it. What a joke. Izuku gets up then, pushing his glasses up to rest on top of his head. So he regrets his past so much he went to talk to some shrink and cry about his mistakes, and told you about it. Boo Fing Hu, What do you want to hear? How proud I am that he realized he was wrong. That the reason I declined all for one's offer to kidnap Katsuki and let me turn him into a Nomyu was because I forgave him or out of the goodness of my heart. Please. He pushes past Aizawa, who outwardly looked unruffled by his outburst, though could it be called an outburst when his voice had been so carefully blank? But was reeling at the sudden revelation that this Fing supervillain had offered a traumatized child to turn his childhood bully into a mindless murder machine. What the F? On the monitors, All Might is encased in a giant glacier as Bakugo uses his explosions to shoot towards the exit as fast as he can before the number one hero can manage to escape, but no one is paying attention anymore. With a last look back at Aizawa, Izuku opens the door, face unreadable. Tell me, hero, if he's so sorry about the past, why has he not once even tried to apologize since I've left the league? He slams the door closed behind him, leaving silence in his wake. Pain bloomed on the boy's right shoulder, and with a yelp he fell to the ground, the cackling of his childhood friend echoing on the school grounds. Green eyes, filled with unshed tears, looked up at his friend Bully, the afternoon sun bathing him in orange. Red eyes like gleaming coals lock on him, and thin lips curve into a smile that will haunt him. How about you do auntie a favor and jump off a bridge? Be useful for once. He kicks him in the face then and makes off to his home, and the boy can feel the tears finally fall. He is grateful that the kick wasn't strong enough to break his nose or dislodge a tooth. Kaken was right, he should just take a swan dive. The boy gets up with some difficulty, his right shoulder straining under a new second-degree burn and developing blisters. He was such a burden on his mother. He knows his mother will ask what caused the burn, and as much as he wants to keep it from her, he knows she will realize it was Kaken. Maybe he can convince her it was an accidental quirk misfire. Lying came easy to him, too easy. This wasn't the first time he was told to kill himself. It wouldn't be the last, would it? It was the first time Kaken had said it. To his face anyways. You look like a kid. The boy looks up dazedly at a teenager, maybe 15 or 16, and wonders if he'll get beat up even more. Just what a useless Deku deserves. The teenager doesn't seem perturbed by the lack of an answer. Red eyes red like Kaken's, red like pain, regarding him with a mix of curiosity and indifference. That happen often? The boy nods. Once, his mother's warning of stranger danger flitting through his mind. She'd be so much better off without him. Why bother staying safe? My sensei wants to meet you, kid. The boy frowns. What high school teacher would want to talk to an elementary school kid? Run, you useless Deku. This isn't right, but maybe he can finally die. Be useful for once. Jump off a bridge. Just die already, useless freak. Before the boy can really make sense of what the teenager is saying, realize he has been slowly spiraling into one of his episodes and isn't thinking straight, the world tilts and grows black and he knows no more. Izuku tugs idly at one of the black leather gloves he's wearing, adjusting the black surgical mask on his face one more time, then knocks, once, twice, pauses, knocks 3 more times. The door to the compound swings open, one of the usual thugs opening the door, raising an unimpressed eyebrow at him. What you want, punk? Izuku raises an eyebrow in return, and the way the thug reacts to the way he puts one hand on his hip and shifts his feet, the other hand coming up to scratch a patch of skin the mask leaves bare, his eyes half rolling at the thug and looking to the side, he knows his demeanor is eerily similar to Overhaul, enough so the thug pales and gulps and looks like he's seen a ghost. And it's not his perfect impression of the Yakuza head, or the way he drawls his next words. It's that anyone who has spent any amount of time in the underworld can recognize those that are truly dangerous just by their body language, by their eyes, by their aura, like an animal instinct buried deep inside. Let me in, dumbass. When the thug doesn't move, Izuku narrows his eyes and activates his quirk, only enough to show the yellow glow of his eyes and faint wisps of purple tendrils around him. I don't have all day, and Overhaul won't like you holding me up. And it's then recognition must finally hit the thug's one brain cell, because he scrambles to open the door wide and bow deeply, muttering an apology. Izuku rewards with a swift, quirk-powered kick to the face. Code still the same, fuckwit. The thug garbled yes, and Izuku rolls his eyes. The Yakuza are still just as pathetic. Once inside the compound, Izuku makes his way down the familiar halls to the door of the secret underground lab, typing in the same code as they had used 3 years ago. He resists the urge to roll his eyes again as the passage opens. Leave it to the dying embers of glorified thugs to be both dramatic and not smart enough to back it up. No wonder it had taken a 13-year-old to fix their mistakes. It doesn't take him long to get to the main lab, and he isn't surprised to find Overhaul bend over a microscope. 𝐒𝐿 leans in the open doorway, posture slack and unassuming and looking both out of place and right at home in his black slacks and dress shoes, white Oxford shirt and a dark brown leather laptop bag slung over his shoulders. The teenager knocks against the doorframe, arms crossed in front of him, and watches with slight amusement as Overhaul WHPs around, ready for a fight, only to visibly relax at the sight of him. "Ah, Cities, long time no see, to what do I owe this pleasure?" 𝐒𝐿 smiles behind his mask. "Now, Overhaul, I heard our little passion project is ready. That true?" They are sitting across from each other in Overhaul's office, and if it weren't for Overhaul's germophobia, they would likely have been sipping tea and eating biscuits as they talk over business. As it were, however, they were merely sitting across from each other, Chronastasis and Mimic standing behind their leader with sour expressions. They had never liked 𝐒𝐿, and the feeling was mutual. "So, you said you heard rumors of the permanent bullets being completed." "Well, less me and more one of my informants, though if I heard about it, so might all for one." 𝐒𝐿 rolls his eyes. "Though, to be frank, he doesn't view you as much of a threat, with or without the bullets, arrogant as he is." Green locks on yellow. "So, are they ready?" Overhaul is quiet for a moment, then nods, looking pleased if his eyes were anything to go by. "They are, thanks to your blueprints." 𝐒𝐿 waves him off. "You know I didn't do that out of the goodness of my heart, Overhaul." "What heart?" He raises an eyebrow. "Exactly." The Yakuza leader snickers. He had taken quite a liking to 𝐒𝐿 after he told him about how he came to work under All for One, and when the teen had let him in on his plans for the man, well, it would only benefit him, anyways. "So, I take it you want to make good on our deal." 𝐒𝐿 snorts, crossing his arms across his chest. "A deal's a deal." "That it is." As he says this, Overhaul moves his hand into his right jacket pocket, taking out a small case. "As you predicted, these have been quite difficult to manufacture. We have 6, so far." Their eyes meet. "As we agreed, you get 2, free of charge, and a gun." He gestures at Chronastasis, who looks angrier by the minute. "I don't see why he should get them, even if he helped. I could have left you with nothing but the temporary bullets and you'd still be floundering about like stranded guppies. I risked my but leaving you with the means to make the permanent stuff." 𝐒𝐿's glare made the second-in-command freeze for a moment, cold sweat gathering on his back. "Now stop your whining and give me the thing gun and bullets." "Why do you want 2, anyways?" Chronastasis mumbles as he hands him the small firearm, and Mimic pipes up, equally annoyed by the teenager. "Yeah, 1 should be enough even for him." 𝐒𝐿 rolls his eyes again, putting the gun and bullet case in his bag. "The second is for someone else, dipshits." He nods, once, to the Yakuza leader, and gets up to leave. At the door he pauses, looking back at Overhaul with blank eyes. "How's 𝐒𝐿?" "Same as ever." "Ah." Gritting his teeth, 𝐒𝐿 leaves with a lazy wave, doing his best to rein in his temper. "Just a little while longer." 𝐒𝐿 removes the surgical mask 2 streets away from the compound and tugs it into his bag, then abruptly ducks into a side alley, leaning against the wall and waiting. It takes the UA 3rd year exactly 37 seconds to catch up, and he yawns boredly. "You really need to work on your stealth, Lemillion. I shouldn't have noticed you 2 steps out the hideout, you know." The blonde frowns, and the expression looks comical to the teenage ex-villain. "I knew you weren't really reformed." 𝐒𝐿 rolls his eyes. "First off, rude. Second off, how did you think did I get all the info in the file I got tonight? What makes you think I did anything other than check up on if the information is still up to date while I disguise it as a courtesy visit?" 𝐂𝐻𝐿 raised an eyebrow, hands on his hips. "Did you?" Another eye roll, and he takes some pleasure in the way it riles up the blonde. "I did. Info's still up to date." The member of the Big Three sighs, clearly unwilling to deal with 𝐒𝐿 if his body language was anything to go by. "So would like to speak with you about the case." Well, Izuku drawls, pushing off the wall. Why didn't you just start with that? Once upon a time Izuku had thought Sir Night Eye was just the coolest. After all, he had been the only sidekick All Might ever had. Sitting before him now, however, just gave Izuku an immediate gut reaction of hating his guts. And, much like it was with Chronastasis and Mimic, the feeling appeared to be mutual. The former sidekick regarded him across his steepled fingers, and if Izuku had been a lesser man he might have cowered at the sheer intimidating presence of him. As it were, he was just bored. Lemillion told me he saw you come out of the Shy Hasaikai hideout. And I told Tintin that I was making sure the information was still up to date. Ignoring Togetta's confused Tintin. Night Eye's glare intensified. That's not all. Izuku leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Proof it. One hand moved to the phone on his desk, eyes never leaving him. Tsukochi can be here in 15 if I call. Tsukochi knows I went. Does he now? Yes, he does. He was just as confused as I was when it turned out you had yet to make a move on them despite all the information I handed you on a silver platter, Sasaki. Izuku's eyes were cold. Prioritize the rescue, isn't it? This is about a little girl being used for human experiments. Speaking of, the former sidekick said, ignoring the accusations. Not moving his gaze he opened the file to the part on A, moving it further towards him. Why do you care? Izuku paused, caught slightly off guard. Pardon me. Why do you care about a little girl that has nothing to do with you? I've met children younger than you and held captive for less, be irreparably corrupted by villains, and from what I have gathered, you aren't as unaffected as you like to make it seem. You have conducted your own human experiments and admitted in your own report that you aided Overhaul in the production of the quirk bullets. It's a miracle you stopped short of helping him make them permanent, not that it stopped him from producing them. The teenager almost laughed at the irony of the last statement. So, I'll ask again, why do you care about one random girl? Why don't you? Answer my question, please. He rolls his eyes. Oh, since you're asking nicely, voice dripping with sarcasm he grabs for the file, only slightly surprised Night Eye lets him take it. Eri was doomed the moment her quirk manifested. All the misfortune in her short life stems from it, and she's been forced to endure things no one should be. Is it so surprising that a quirkless villain victim would sympathize? He throws the file back on the desk, page opened to the underground lab layout. If I thought I could have gotten away with it, I would have gotten her out of there the first time I met her. Being honest with you, Sasaki, I was quite close to just doing your job for you earlier. You sound angry, that was Togeta, and Izuku had to give it to the blonde, he was more observant than he pegged him for. Course I am. That but keeps cutting her open and then reforming her with his quirk with no regard for her mental or physical well-being. I told him over and over that there were half a dozen ways to get her DNA in easier ways, but it wasn't convenient enough. Again, why do you care? Izuku contemplates for a moment, then leans forward, hands pressed together as if in prayer as he regards the man before him. What do you think did All for One do to get me to cooperate? Night Eye shrugs, but Izuku could tell he was wary of him now, and it vindicated him. Respect and fear were things he could work with. Let me show you, then. He gets up and first removes his gloves, noting both the hero's gazes flicking to his missing finger. His fingers move to the buttons of his shirt and make quick work of it. Izuku watches their eyes roam the expanse of his chest and abdomen littered with badly healed scar tissue in the shape of gashes and star bursts and the shimmer of burns. His arms slip from the sleeves of the shirt to reveal dark red, gnarled skin where the color had never gone back to normal from months of restraints. When the wounds have sunk in, he finally turns his back to them, his back an expanse of welts, and he knows these need an explanation. This was a barbed metal WHP, if you're wondering. There is silence as he puts his shirt back on, and as he buttons it back up he turns to look at a blank-faced Night Eye, but the man's eyes betray him. The knowledge doesn't taste as sweet as he expected. Eri had scars like my chest by the time I first got there, barely half a year since Overhaul had started working on the bullets. Izuku grabs his bag, putting the leather gloves back on to avoid stares on public transit. Absent-mindedly he thinks he should thank Powerloader for them, since the right index moves in sync with the middle finger, looking almost real. It's really a wonder, isn't it, that I would care. He leaves without another word and is only minutely surprised they don't tell him to stay. Izuku's phone vibrated in his pocket as he stepped off the train, a simple text from Aizawa reading "Where are you?" and he stopped in his tracks, confused. Me 12:43 p.m. just got off the train, why? Aizawa 12:45 p.m. hurry up, problem child. He frowned at his phone. Really, Eraser could use to be a bit more polite. Putting his phone back in his pocket and shrugging, he hurried to the gates of UA looming a little ahead. There was no need to aggravate the pro unnecessarily. His day had already been annoying enough, he didn't have to try and make it worse for himself. It would get worse anyways. Eraserhead was leaning against the wall next to his room's door, arms crossed and looking as bored as ever. Upon seeing Izuku, he pushed off to stand straight, motioning to his room with a thumb. Put your things in there and get into some gym clothes, we've got places to be. Izuku raised an eyebrow as he moved to unlock his room. Aizawa, it's a Saturday. Yes, and we've got places to be, so hurry up already. The teen sighed, giving up. And he calls me rude. So, where are we headed? Gym Gamma. Cementos. Why? Someone wants to talk to you, but he wanted to do it there. Okay. Why? Izuku's voice was cold and detached as he glared at his childhood bully, his arms crossed over his chest. Like I said, he wants to talk to you, Aizawa said with the kind of bored detachment that meant he wasn't happy about something. You are both allowed to use your quirks if you decide to fight. Have fun, or whatever. With that he crawled into his sleeping bag and appeared to fall asleep. Well, okay then. Izuku looked Bakugo up and down, not moving from his place. So, what do you want to talk about? I'm sorry. A different him might have been stunned, might have teared up and accepted the apology that came years too late. As it was, it just made him angry. Bakugo blinked, his sight only blocked for a split second, but it was enough for a quirk-powered knee to collide with his stomach and send him careening into the far wall of the gym. He dropped to the ground, bile rising to his throat and spilling from his lips with the taste of acid and decay, red eyes meeting glowing yellow, faint purple wisps floating around Izuku like an aura. That's nice and all, but I don't care. Name: Midoriya Izuku. Age: 15. Quirk: quirkless cherophobia activated by intense negative feelings, such as hatred or anger. The quirk allows its user to greatly enhance their physical abilities, including strength, stamina, reflexes, and senses. The stronger the emotions, the stronger the enhancement. Continued activation relies on the user to keep the negative emotions alive. Feeling positive emotions will immediately deactivate the quirk and make its activation impossible. Prolonged use of the quirk can lead to mental instability, depression, suicidal thoughts, choleric outbursts, and/or increase homicidal tendencies. The purple wisps solidified the longer Bakugo looked, and he saw the veins in Izuku's arms protrude as he balled his hands to fists, yellow eyes looking at him in a cold rage he had never seen. All for One reportedly took the quirk from a serial killer who had committed his first murder at the age of 9. Driven mad by the continued use of his quirk, he committed suicide immediately after losing it. Well, come on, Katsuki. Voice low, Izuku slowly walked towards him, the purple wisps coiling around his fists like snakes. Let's talk. Bakugo moved out of the way of Izuku's punch on instinct alone, the smell of caramel cloying sweetly in the wake of the small explosion he'd used to get away from an attack that would surely have sent him flying into the wall again. That first kick to the stomach had been powerful, but he suspected that hadn't been the extent of what Izuku could do with it. He wishes he knew what the quirk actually did. Bakugo grabbed at Izuku's wrist as he aimed for another punch, moving his free hand to the ceiling and letting off an explosion to propel them to the ground. Izuku crashed into the floor feet first, a crater forming as he grabbed the front of Bakugo's shirt and flipped him over, followed by a kick to his side. He felt one of his ribs crack as he was sent rolling across the broken cement floor, coughing up more bile as he came to a stop some feet away. You're pretty pathetic, you know. Red and yellow met across the gym. What, did you think I'd fall over myself to forgive you like when we were little? Don't make me laugh, Katsuki. No, his voice came out raspy, and his throat hurt from the stomach acid. I just think you deserve to know. How quaint. If the sarcasm hadn't been dripping from his voice, the slow, mocking clapping would have made his feelings obvious. The big, bad Bakugo Katsuki realized that bullying and suicide baiting is wrong, and all it took was talking to a shrink for 5 years. I'm so proud of you. Izuku had come to a stop next to him, and he knew he should move, but he couldn't get up from the bent-over position he had been in since emptying his stomach contents on the floor. I'm so glad that my being tortured and made to murder people was good for something, at least. Why? Izuku raised a green eyebrow, crossing his arms over his chest again. Why what? Why didn't you? His eyes were unfocused, but he looked up at him none the same. Why didn't you take him up on the offer to kidnap me and turn me into one of those things? So Aizawa told you about that, here. He stomped his foot down hard on Bakugo's lower back and he folded under the impact, face pressed into his bile. Mostly because I didn't think you were worth it. A kick to his side, turning him over onto his back. It should have worried him how easily Izuku was curb stomping him, but his head was swimming from pain. Just a little fie, Katsuki. I didn't decline out of the goodness of my heart. I stopped being a good person 4 years ago. I declined so I get to see the look on your face when you realize that no matter what you do, you'll never get what you were looking for all these years. Bakugo felt a 4-fingered hand grab him by the front of his shirt, lift him up, and he grit his teeth in an attempt to get his wits back about him. You can spend the rest of your pathetic life apologizing to me, and I'll never forgive you. Forgiveness is a privilege of weak, sheltered people and something I haven't been able to afford since the day you told me to jump off a bridge. The wind was knocked out of him when Izuku shoved him back into the ground. This talk is over. Bakugo knew it would be smarter to stay quiet. It had taken Izuku all but 3 hits to practically incapacitate him. Bakugo was many things, but he was neither a coward nor a quitter. If you aren't a good person, then why did you save 4 eyes and eye bags? Green eyes glowed with fury as Izuku rounded on him, and he wondered idly why he wasn't using his quirk when he saw glowing red eyes behind him, and the capture scarf of his homeroom teacher wrapped around Izuku like a snake. That is quite enough of that. Bakugo can't fight back anymore, so either you stick to speaking only or you leave, problem child. A growl tore from Izuku's throat that sounded more animal than man, but he relented, relaxing his posture and waiting for Aizawa to take the capture weapon back. Green eyes, still shining bright and hard with anger, focused back on him as he slowly sat up, trying to not aggravate his injuries further. I spent the first year of captivity being continuously tortured both mentally and physically. His voice was carefully blank, as if he used all his concentration on keeping his emotions in check. After a year he forced a quirk onto me that drove its first user into a homicidal rage and caused him to kill himself when he lost it, then ordered me to kill a random person or get tortured some more. If he had anything left in his stomach, Bakugo thought he would have been emptying it by now. He wasn't sure if the content of the words upset him more than the manner in which Izuku said them. By the time I was 13 and he made me work for the Yakuza, he had forced me to kill 9 people including the first and help create a total of 20 Nomu. The Yakuza made me conduct experiments on a 4-year-old little girl to create quirk-erasing drags. And you know what's the best part? By the time I was 12 he let me walk around as I pleased. All I would have had to do was walk into a hero agency or a police station, but he'd broken me enough that I didn't dare. Izuku let out a humorless chuckle. And while I was going through that and soiling my hands, you got to continue pursuing your dreams and live a normal life, get told what a great hero you'd make when you made 6 years of my life utter hell. I'd like to say I'm sorry, but I'm not. Your apology is 5 years too late, Katsuki. So I saved 2 of your classmates. If that makes me a good person, then the bar is pretty low on that front. I've killed and committed human experiments, that's my past and that remains a fact. You've bullied me and broken me long before All for One ever laid a hand on me, that's your past and that remains a fact. The past doesn't die and doesn't forget, Katsuki. But that doesn't mean I can't try to live the rest of my life how I see fit, either. You say you're sorry. Prove it, don't just give me empty platitudes and expect a pat on the head. Why the F am I here? Kaminari and Kirishima were each dragging him by an arm towards the rest of the class, minus Bakugo, grinning from ear to ear. Bro, don't be like that. Yeah, Dude, this benefits everyone. Izuku threw them an unimpressed stare. And how, exactly, does going to the mall with you overexcited puppies do that? Easy, Midobro. You need to buy stuff for the summer camp, too. Also, you're, like, the only one here who gets to use their quirk if something happens and would survive fighting a villain on your own, so we get some protection out of it. Aizawa set you up to this to make sure you behave, didn't he? Maybe, both chorused, then pushed him towards the rest of Class 1A. Izuku sighed tiredly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. How do you even know that I got permission to use my quirk offensively? Ida chopped at the air as he replied louder than was strictly necessary. Aizawa-sensei informed us that you may use your quirk in order to defend members of the class until we either receive our provisional licenses or the league is captured. Kaminari and Ashido had to suppress a snicker as they heard their team mumble something under his breath that sounded close to "I'm going to hide his stupid sleeping bag and his stupid caffeinated jelly pouches for this." Izuku sighed as he surveyed the gathered students. Okay, who needs what? The class quickly divided into groups, some needing clothes or shoes or training equipment. Soon enough they all had his number in their phones in case of emergencies, and only Todoroki still stood next to him, blinking owlishly. What about you? I need sunscreen. His left hand lightly brushed against his right forearm. My right side burns easily. The TA hummed. There's a drugstore nearby. I need some sunscreen too, and my soap and shampoo are almost out too. Maybe bug spray, chapstick and sunglasses. Let's go. Todoroki looked overwhelmed as he nodded and followed behind the shorter teen. You need that much for a training camp? Well, it's supposed to last for a week, and all Aizawa said was that it was secluded and woodsy, so it wouldn't hurt to be sure. The AC of the small drugstore was a relief to Izuku after the stifling heat outside, while Todoroki seemed as unaffected as ever. As they made their way down the aisles, Izuku thought he saw familiar red eyes and light blue hair out of the corner of his eyes, and he quickly moved so his back was to where he thought he'd seen him. He grabbed Todoroki lightly by the elbow, his eyes sweeping up and down the narrow corridor. Biting his lower lip, he dug into his breath pocket and pushed his earphones in the other boy's hands. Put these in and act like you are really invested in the music. I think I saw Shigaraki. Bicolored eyes widened and immediately swept the aisle. What? Where? We should dash. You won't do anything, Todoroki. Izuku's voice was low and carefully controlled, green eyes hard as he pinned him with his gaze. The league thinks I'm still working for them. He won't come close with you nearby, probably, but I'm not risking my cover or your safety, got it? Just stay where I can see you, but stay a little ways away. Most importantly, don't look at him. If he approaches me, he can kill you before you know it. With that he turned away and made his way down the aisle, posture missing its usual laid-back appearance and seeming more like a cat ready to pounce. Something in Todoroki urges him to ignore Izuku's warnings and follow him, but he stays rooted to the spot, slowly putting the earphones in and trying to look invested in the various types of sunscreen, watching his TA out of the corner of his eyes. Before, he might have thrown caution to the wind, itching to freeze Shigaraki the first chance he got, but he had seen Bakugo after his attempt to reconcile whatever was between him and Izuku, and that had been after 2 days of healing from Recovery Girl. It hadn't been pretty. So he stood back and watched as a hooded figure made their way towards Izuku, and if he hadn't been looking for it he would have thought it was just someone asking for advice. It was interesting how much you could miss if you didn't know the signs or were distracted. Izuku kept his eyes on the medical supplies in front of him, never fully turning towards Shigaraki, but kept his face angled so Todoroki couldn't see his lips. What are you doing here? Can't I catch up with my precious baby brother? Shigaraki was crouched down, inspecting different kinds of eye drops, his habit of 4-finger grips present despite his special gloves. You know that's not why I'm asking, Tomini. Are you going to the summer camp with the hero brats? If Izuku was surprised by his question, he didn't show it, not that Shigaraki expected him to. He was always the calmer between the two. His brother turned from the band-aids to the bug bite lotions, grabbing 2 different brands and making a show of comparing them. Yeah, how'd you know about it? I wasn't even told where it is. Our other spy tipped us off. She's gonna give us the location once you get there. That got a reaction out of him, albeit only a subtle raise of his eyebrow as he picked one of the lotions and dropped it in his hand basket. Oh, she that desperate for cash. Apparently. Some accident with her parents' work or something, I didn't care enough to ask. Izuku's eyes surveyed the shelf again, then grabbed an ointment and held it out to Shigaraki. This one's got cortisone, it'll help with the itching, I know it gets worse during summer. As the villain took the ointment with a low snort, he stood up, slipping a microSD into his other hand, shadowed by their bodies. See you around, Aizu. Todoroki watched Shigaraki leave around the corner and released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, finally focusing back on the sunscreen and grabbing the one Fuyumi had recommended that morning. Can I have my earphones back? Bicolored eyes met green ones, sighing lowly as he removed them and held them out. You were all the way down the aisle and I still got tense. Izuku chuckled as he grabbed a bottle of sunscreen as well, different from the one the taller teen had grabbed, stronger and meant for allergic skin. He's got that effect on people. The TA then grabbed 2 chapsticks with SPF, smirking at Todoroki's confused expression. You should get one, too, or you'll end up looking like Shigaraki. Haha, very funny. I'm serious. Now let's go before another villain shows up. Shouldn't we inform someone? What if he hurts people? Izuku shrugged, making his way to the register. I doubt he will unless we sick the police and heroes on him. He was just here by chance and took the opportunity to exchange information. Todoroki's eyes narrowed as he followed the shorter teen. What info did you give him? None. At the unconvinced face the taller teen made, Izuku rolled his eyes. I really didn't. Although, he paused, frowning, then sighed as he took out his phone. I should probably warn Aizawa, anyways. About what? You're a bit too curious for your own good, Todoroki. Their eyes locked again, and under different circumstances Todoroki would have been impressed by Izuku typing blind. There's a leak that's not me, and they might want to keep that in mind. Todoroki frowned, watching his TA finish his text message and putting his phone away again. Who'd leak information to the League? You surprise me. I would have thought you of all people would be a little less trusting. Izuku continued his way to the register, then, ignoring the rest of Todoroki's questions. The brunette girl was fiddling with her macchiato as her eyes nervously flickered around the busy cafe, the bell at the entrance drowned out by the din of conversation around. Her large eyes widened as the boy sat down in front of her, gloved hands coming up to remove his black surgical mask and revealing a cold smirk. Uraraka Okako, I assume. The girl opened her mouth to reply but was interrupted by the waitress, and the suave smirk and calculating eyes of the boy melted into a sunshine smile and friendly green eyes. Yes, one mocha, please, that would be great. The waitress returned his smile with friendly professionalism, the boy's face morphing back into business mode immediately. Nice to meet you, you can call me Sithiz while we conduct business. Alright. She was completely out of her depth, and suspected the villain had arranged things the way he did to take advantage of this. When she had agreed to this meeting she had expected dark back alleys and envelopes of laundered money, not a cafe across the police station during lunch rush. First things first, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. I believe congratulations are in order, Uraka. It's not every day someone with a non-combat quirk makes it into UA's hero course. Especially not, with your circumstances. The villain once again morphed into sunshine and rainbows when he received his drink, the freckles on his pale skin giving the illusion of innocence. After a sip from his drink he smirks. I'm sorry you didn't receive the scholarship. Can we just skip all this? The glint in the boy's eyes told her he was waiting for her to snap, and she berated herself. Some hero she'd make. He straightened in his seat, but to anyone else he just looked like he was excited to tell a friend something. Of course, Uraraka. I'm sorry, I have the tendency to ramble. He reaches into the pocket of his hoodie, retrieving a burner phone. This has a single number saved on it. Once you have information on a convenient situation to get at All Might, call, let it ring thrice. You will receive a message on where to meet. She eyes the phone wearily. That's all. That's all. And you guys are going to pay my first year at UA. Yes. She bites her bottom lip, quickly snatching the phone and putting it in her bag before she can change her mind. Hesitating, brown eyes meet green again. What's your plan with All Might? The boy raises an eyebrow and tilts his head. At first glance he might look confused, but the girl can't help but feel like prey. Nothing that concerns you, Uraraka. We simply want a single information, and you're set. That's the deal. But hard eyes tell her to quiet down as the people 2 tables over look in their direction. I won't do anything if you are trying to kill him. The boy looks at her for a long moment. What makes you think I'd tell you? What makes you think I'd tell the truth? Brown eyes flicker to the table, then back to his. If I can't trust you to tell me the truth, I can't trust you to pay me. Her eyes suddenly become hard, determined. If I don't believe you, I'll go to the police. When he raises his eyebrow this time, his confusion appears genuine. Oh, you have spunk. I like that. The boy reaches for his wallet, fiddling with its contents. Don't worry your little head, Uraraka, All Might won't die. He pauses once, seeming to change his mind. Well, in the end it's up to him, I suppose. Does that answer your question? It was a rhetorical question, she knows, as he puts far too much money on the table and quickly downs the rest of his mocha. When had he even had the time to drink it during their conversation? In a fluid motion he puts his mask back in its place and his wallet back in his hoodie pocket. I'm looking forward to your call, Uraraka. And then he was gone, and the girl wondered what she'd gotten herself into. What do you mean you won't tell us who the traitor is? The lack of cold in his chest told Izuku that Aizawa had his quirk directed at him. His feet were against the edge of the desk, kicking back his chair on the hind legs, arms hanging over the back of it as he stared at the ceiling. What it says on the tin, eraser. I ain't telling you, USJ. And why is that, brat? Izuku raised his gaze to look at the angry teacher, black hair floating around him like a demonic halo. The deal was information on the League, the traitor, he made air quotes around the word. An independent contractor. Really, he was giving them enough hints to figure it out on their own, he thought. Why, you little dash, Aizawa-kun, that is quite enough, Nezu cut in. Now, Midoriya-kun, I think you should be a little more serious about the matter. Why are you really not telling us? Izuku looked at the principal with a thoughtful expression, then let the chair thump soundly back to the floor. The traitor, as you call them, only sold the League information once, about the best time to attack All Might. We paid their first year of tuition for their troubles. And now they are going to sell the location of the training camp. What's your point? My class almost died, I almost died at USJ. Oh, get off it, Eraser, I wouldn't have hurt you worse than I did and you know it. Do I? There was silence as Izuku met Aizawa's bloodshot gaze. Do I really? I thought I did, but then you turn around and make me doubt myself, kid. I arranged the whole goddamn USJ attack with the least amount of injuries possible without raising suspicions and pulled my punches. That whole thing could have ended with all of you dead and nothing left to bury, Eraser. Izuku stands up, his eyes hard as he fixes his gaze on Aizawa. I won't blow my cover because you don't like dealing with variables, hero. Telling you who the traitor is won't give you anything worthwhile. Maintaining my cover and letting the traitor be will. Then what do you suggest? Nezu piped up, sipping from his tea. I don't know, he shrugged. It's none of my business. I'm not in the habit of selling out desperate people. That's rich. Coming from a double agent, isn't it? A double agent who won't remain one if you make me blow my cover. Izuku steps around the conference table, eyes hard as he glowers at Aizawa. This shtick is the only insurance I have with the police and the commission. I'm not putting my life in your hands without a guarantee that I'll walk out of it without a ride straight to Tartarus. His shoulders fall as he averts his gaze, and Aizawa isn't sure if it's an act or genuine. He is good at reading people, but the teenager had a level of control over his features and voice that was almost eerie. He says things that should register as lies. Eraserhead. Tsukochi's voice rings in his ears. White lies at least, but nothing he says rings as anything but true, and it's wrong. This kid is either stupidly honest, a psychopath or a mixture of both, and it's scary. I've been nothing but cooperative and honest, eraser, the kid says, and the detective's words ring inside his head again, over and over like a broken record. The kid says truths that are lies, eraser, I don't know how but he must be. I have been providing all the research I have done under All for One, have provided information on the Yakuza and on Stain and countless other villains that have been giving you heroes the slip for years. I have helped train your brats, I have saved their lives when I had no reason to, I have helped with your lesson plans and grading, and quite frankly I'm sick of being treated like a disposable pawn yet again. No one spends 5 years with the boogeyman and comes out this side of the river, eraser, so either guarantee my freedom once and for all or be content with what I give you. No one has ever betrayed the boogeyman and lived to tell the tale, Eraserhead. No one has ever spent more than a month at the boogeyman's mercy and tried to betray him. Whatever he did to that kid is irreversible and we'd be fools to trust him. Izuku's hands go to his neck, the marks of the collar long since faded. You trusted me enough to remove this, what more do you want? He didn't wait for an answer as he turned and left the room. Okiko scratches her bare calf idly as she waits to board the bus, her phone already turned off and in Aizawa-sensei's bag along with everyone else's. For a moment she had been worried they knew it was her, but when he had moved on to Zuchan without a second glance she had breathed an internal sigh of relief. Against her will her eyes found their tars across the crowd, his green eyes as unreadable as they had always been. All right, Aizawa-sensei drawls from the front of the bus. Get on and be quiet, you gremlins. She turns to walk to the bus when a cold hand comes down on her shoulder. We gotta talk later. Midoriya's voice is low, and his hand leaves her shoulder almost instantly. To onlookers it would seem like he merely brushed past her, and she watched him engage in idle chatter with some of her classmates. Okiko swallowed thickly. As she walked off towards the bus again she saw her teacher watch them all with hawk's eyes, and she realized with a start that they did know, just not who. 𝐿𝐼 taps Midoriya's shoulders as they get off the bus. I need to ask you something. The other teenager seems wary as he looks around the rest of the class before focusing back on him. If it's about that day at the mall no, not about that, 𝐿𝐼 waves him off. Just, are you related to Principal Nezu somehow? Like a secret love child? Midoriya blinks slowly. What? 𝐿𝐼 waves at the other's scar. Well, I mean, your scars match. Todoroki, he says with the type of voice Fuyumi uses with her students. Nezu isn't human. Shotuo just shrugs. Quirks exist. Midoriya looks like he wants to argue when a car stops nearby, and they are interrupted by a loud voice. Oh my! Look guys! Our little kitten has returned. 𝐿𝐼 can't help the little flames flickering on his hair as Pixie Bob hugged him. How are you doing, sweetie? Gee good. He cleared his throat, trying in vain to ignore the snickers and jeers from his classmates. I didn't expect to see you again, so soon. Ragdoll struck a pose as she giggled at his consternation. Well, you see, UA needed a large area for you guys to train at. And we own this whole mountain range, so, it wasn't that he hadn't enjoyed his internship with them, on the contrary, he was pretty sure he'd enjoy focusing on rescue heroics after graduation, especially because it would anger Endeavor, but he just couldn't deal with their antics. At all. His eyes flicker to Kuta still sitting in their car, and he gives him a little wave. The boy merely narrows his eyes and sticks out his tongue before ducking down behind the window. I see he still loves me. Mandalay pats his head consolingly, and behind him he hears the others snicker. Don't worry, he hates us too. Her tone is teasing but he knows she hates it. He can't exactly blame the kid, but still. They were too nice to be treated like that. He is about to say more, but suddenly Mandalay pushes him back towards his snickering classmates, and the next he knows they are sent over the cliffside by Pixie Bob. 𝐿𝐼 is immediately reminded of his internship, and sighs as he makes an ice slide towards the ground below. Oh joy! Okiko taps her fingers to return the gravity to the bucket full of dirty dishes, sighing as she turns around only to shriek as she runs face first into Midoriya, his eyes hard as he watches her. Can you be any more obvious? You scared me. Whatever, he mumbles, motioning her to follow him out the back door of the kitchen. Once outside, he turns to her, arms crossed. So, how did you give them your location? I don't dash. She stops when he holds up his mangled hand, one eyebrow raised. She averts her eyes. With a sigh she bends down and removes the tracker from the underside of her left sneaker, holding it out to him. Ah, he says simply, taking it from her for a moment before dropping it to the ground and stomping down. What do they want with the location? Got any info on that? Shigaraki was kinda tight-lipped for a change. I really don't, she whimpers, scrubbing at her eyes nervously and feeling the tears pool at the corners. Please, don't tell anyone. My parents, there was a villain attack and the insurance Uraka, he interrupts her, and his voice and face seem uncharacteristically gentle. I haven't revealed your identity. They know there's a traitor, but I didn't tell them who it is. Akiko is stunned for a moment, enough so that her tears stop. Why? Midoriya shrugs. Well, for one it would have compromised us both, and I can't have that, he admits easily. But also, Uraka, I don't make it a habit to F up people's lives for no reason. You needed the money, and the info you gave the League. Peanuts. It's not worth ruining your life over. But, the USJ let me tell you a secret, he says, stepping a little closer to her. Your intel only gave us a time and place. What happened there was inevitable and not your fault, okay? And whatever they plan here isn't yours either. Without you, there would have been other ways to get to All Might, and other ways to find this place. He hesitates, eyes seeming to catch on something behind her before he focuses back on her. I won't tell on you, Uraka, and I won't presume to tell you what to do. But if you feel like you can't live with yourself, then go and tell Aizawa. I'm not stopping you. Why are you being so nice all of a sudden? He raises an eyebrow at her. I'm not nice, just pragmatic. You're a teenager, don't burden yourself with more than you can carry. If you're going to be a hero, you will have more regrets than you can count eventually. There is no need to get a head start. You're a teenager too, she retorts, thinking she is starting to understand. Even if you had a head start, you can still slow down and take a break, I think. He looks at her for a long moment, eyebrow raised, then turns and walks away without another word. Sometimes, Izuku wonders if everyone around him was stupid on purpose or on accident. He knows Aizawa had overheard him and Uraraka long enough that he should at least suspect her as the traitor. By the time he had noticed, it had already been too late for plausible deniability, but the man hadn't approached either of them about it. When Izuku had asked him if the test of courage was a good idea, the man had simply raised an eyebrow. Why? And risk your cover? Or is there something you would like to tell me? They had stared at each other for a moment, before Aizawa sighed. There are heroes throughout the area the kids will be in, and they are in pairs. If we act too nervous, it might tip the League off. We don't even know if they will attack tonight. He looked at him. Or do we? We don't, Izuku muttered begrudgingly. He looked out at the dark forest, biting his lips. Give them emergency permissions, at least. Say it's just in case. The area is huge and hard to monitor. Look at you, all worried. Oh, can it, Eraser, he growled, glaring at the older man before he made off to the woods. Where do you think you're going? Izuku only flipped him off in lieu of a response. Maybe it should have assuaged his worries a bit. Aizawa must know that it's dangerous to have kids spread out with their location known. But, on the other hand, they didn't have a way to know the students would be spread thin throughout the forest surrounded by heroes who knew the place in and out. And he hadn't talked against him when he brought up emergency permissions. With the current League roster, there was a good chance the students would be alright if push came to shove. But they were just teenagers. Naive kids whose worst encounter with villains so far had been a tightly controlled farce he had concocted. There had been no variables in his plan. There rarely were. Sure, there had been Stain, but Ida had been lying on the ground like the dumbass he was, and Shinsu had brainwashed the villain in a second. Would they be all right against people out to kill them? No, definitely not. Izuku had given up on playing hero a long time ago. But he also really hated unknown variables. The first thing Izuku sees when he gets to the cliffside is the kid Kirishima had approached when they had arrived at camp against Todoroki's advice, and who had subsequently punched him in the nuts. It had been terribly amusing if you ask him, "What do you want, broccoli?" Izuku only raises an unimpressed eyebrow at the twerp, then keeps sweeping his gaze over the visible part of the mountain and woods. Just checking something. What about you? Avoiding you stupid heroes. He looks back at the kid then, mentally going over things he knew about him, before it clicked. Oh, you're Waterhose Kid, here. That was shitty, my condolences or whatever, he shrugs. If it makes you feel better, I'm not a hero or a student, so don't go and lash your grief out at me. Then what dash? Oh. Quite a few more faces here than expected. They both stiffen, turning to face the giant of a man stepping towards them. Muscular, Izuku recalls from the roster Shigaraki had given him. It's a bit of an ironic twist, he thinks, gaze darting to the orphan. Ah, you're that spy the big boss talked about, here. Fancy meeting you here. You're a villain. Izuku sighs at the brat, rubbing his temple. So what? He ain't on the list, but Big Boss said if we come across you we should make sure. You think I can kill him as a bit of a warm-up? It's been ages. Izuku can tell the kid is frustrated at being ignored, but more so he's scared out of his mind. Frankly, Izuku really wishes he wasn't anywhere near this place. What list? He inches slowly in front of the kid, trying to keep the other villains focus on him. And frankly, I'd rather you focus on the objective either way. Some of the others really aren't more than a distraction to the students if you ask me. Muscular frowns, hands twitching. Well, we were supposed to get those 2 finalist kids from the festival, YA no. He shrugs, annoyed. Can YA tell me where they are? That's what spies do, innit? Izuku stopped making spur-of-the-moment decisions when he was 12 and almost followed his mom home. There was no one he could rely on in this world, and it did no good to be reckless or heroic in a world of pain and villainy. If Izuku does something, it's planned, every detail laid out, every variable accounted for, no room left for error to the best of his ability. Then he overhears Todoroki and his father, and his mind whirs, and he finds himself giving a pep talk before he can stop himself. Then Ida goes vigilante, hunting down a serial killer for revenge, and he is racing across rooftops and risking his life. Then a Nomyu he helped create from a childhood friend of Katsuki's flies off with Aizawa, and he makes the split-second decision to shoot it before he realizes what he's doing. Izuku hates what this class has been doing to him, how they have made him care despite himself. Caring was a weakness he couldn't afford, not when he was going to come out the other side of this ordeal in one piece. Izuku makes a split-second decision. Izuku hates his quirk. There is a constant sphere of cold in his chest, all his negativity manifest, a constant reminder that he is a wretched person who deserves nothing good in his life. When he activates it, the cold spreads throughout his veins like ice in his BLD. All his hatred, all his sadness, all his grief, all his contempt, all of it is playing on loop in his mind, a cacophony of jeers and slurs and suicide bait, of starburst scars and lashings and no, please, stop, I will help you, just make it stop. He teeters on the brink, and every second he leans closer and closer to the abyss, and it has stared back a long time ago. Izuku fears the day, the hour, the minute, the second that the abyss becomes him. Izuku sees yellow and feels colder than ever. The thing about murder is as follows. The first is the worst. The second slightly less so. Eventually, you either grow numb or feel your spirit break into 1,000 pieces, never to be mended. Izuku chose numbness, but something broke regardless. Izuku had never murdered to protect. Izuku had never murdered to protect. Izuku heaves a deep breath, blinking BLD from his eyes. There is a squelching sound as he removes his right foot from Muscular's caved-in skull, and another him would have felt sick. As it is, he merely feels slightly dizzy. He had blanked out towards the end there, not the first time, but the first time it had lasted so long. He vaguely remembers the blonde having been happy at the challenge, and telling him that he'd think of him when he'd kill the brat, and then there was static. Blue fire erupts to his right, deep in the forest, and he comes fully back to himself. Izuku turns around to the shaking child, and a more sensitive him might have tried to wipe off the BLD from his hands as he reached for him, ignoring his struggles. Let's get you back to camp, kid, he says, voice monotone, and the kid finally stops struggling. I bet your aunt is worried sick right now. Things are a blur to 𝐿𝐿 that night. There are villains and screams, poison gas, blue fire and clones. There is Midoriya Izuku covered in BLD and bits of flesh carrying a shaking Kuta on his back, pushing him in his hands and then glowing with his terrible quirk as he makes back into the woods. Hiro-san, Kuta whimpers as he makes his way to the cottage. Why did he save me from another villain? 𝐿𝐿 wasn't sure he had an answer to that, at the very least not one meant for children's ears. Once the flames are doused and losses accounted for, 𝐿𝐿 sees the usually collected villainonaut walk over to a tree at the edge of the clearing and kick it clean in two, and 𝐿𝐿 isn't entirely sure he used his quirk for that feat. Amidst the general chaos of the cleanup, Uraraka comes towards him, tears in her eyes and asking for forgiveness. 𝐿𝐿 looks at her bruised face and bandaged wounds, and makes the executive decision to sweep her involvement under the rug. Parents are informed. The Bakugas are in tears. Endeavor needs a new office. Shigaraki grumbled as Izuku overtook him in Mario Kart, his controller only remaining intact by virtue of his artist gloves. Was that necessary? Yep, Izuku grins as the next race loads in. Got to give you something to work towards while I'm hanging with the heroes and all. I still think you don't have to do it, Shigaraki mumbles as he sends off a blue shell, sending Izuku straight off the side of Rainbow Road. Izuku rolls his eyes as he waits to be placed back on the road. I thought you trusted me, bro. I do, dumbass, Shigaraki deadpans, cursing as he drives straight into a banana peel. It's the heroes I don't trust. Just stick to our plan, steer clear of Birdmask FR and reconvene when the dust has settled after the show. Red eyes meet green as the race ends, and he puts the controller down on the coffee table. Be careful. Aren't I always? 𝐿𝐿 wakes up in a dusty room barely a quarter of their classroom and filled with broken furniture. He's bound to one of two intact chairs, the weird shackles around his wrists not tight but somehow stifling his quirk to the strength it had when he was a toddler and much harder to call forth. Some bootleg suppressant cuffs off the black market, most likely. The princess awakens, a gravely voice speaks up from in front of him, the grinning visage of the fire quirk villain more grotesque in the low light. What do you want from me? 𝐿𝐿 tries to take stock of his bindings as covertly as possible, and is glad he's in here with a fire user instead of the guy who can dust him in seconds. Small mercies. The villain smirks wider, and the staples stretch his ruined skin in morbid ways. 𝐿𝐿 thinks he sees BLD seep from one of the grafts. Is that any way to greet your dearest brother after so long, 𝐿𝐿? He narrows his eyes, fingers of his left hand fiddling with the lock of the right handcuff, heating it slowly. It was going to take a while, his fingers barely reaching 50 degrees Celsius with the knockoff suppressors on. Sure, you're my dead brother, very believable. I used to have red hair, but it turned white over time, like mom's, the villain says. Nonchalantly, fingers playing with a small blue flame. When I turned out to be a failed product, the BSTRD made mom have Natsuo and you. I tried to kill you when you were a baby. He raised an eyebrow at 𝐿𝐿, who had gone still, the control of his weakened quirk slipping. That convincing enough, brat? So, 𝐿𝐿 swallows, trying to calm himself down. He could freak out once he was out of here and far away from volatile psychopaths. What? You turned villain to spite dear old dad 'cause you weren't the golden child anymore. He leaned back in an attempt to seem more in control of his emotions than he really was, hoping the bad lighting obscured his pale face. All you had to do was ask, Tuya, we could have traded whenever. You think you're so funny, don't you? I'm hysterical, actually, 𝐿𝐿 deadpans, left thumb going back to heating the lock on his cuffs. So why am I here? Boss saw you at the store with our agent. Tuya shrugs, the flame dancing from one finger to the next like he's playing with a coin. Figured if he keeps you around you might be a potential member. Could be the final nail in the coffin of our old man's career if you turned. 𝐿𝐿 sat up straighter, eyes narrowing at his older brother. What are you talking about? Tuya smirks at him, the flame casting unsettling shadows across his scarred face. Boss gave Midoriya all the dirt I had compiled on the old man, and it's currently making the rounds amongst the journalists. Now imagine if his perfect little puppet turned villain at the same time, showing up with the son he declared dead years ago. He'll never recover. What makes you think I'd dash? Oh please, you think Midoriya wasn't in contact with us all this time, show. Tuya interrupts him, the flame flaring in his hand. We know you despise the old man. So what do you say? 𝐿𝐼 looks at him for a moment, and now that he knows what to look for he can see it. The shape of the nose and the jawline. The slight build he can already see in himself when he looks in the mirror. The unhinged ambition and rage in his blue eyes that are so much like endeavors. He wants to freak out, but he knows he needs to stay calm, no matter what. He glances at the door behind his brother. Am I the only one you took? Tuya shrugs. There's the feral 𝐒𝐿odo kid in the next room over. Dunno what boss wants with him, heard he was a right but to Midoriya. 𝐿𝐼 takes a deep breath and steels his nerves. He thanks the powers that be for his poker face before he removes his thumb from the lock and holds out his hands. Then get these off of me, if Shigaraki does that, but I'd at least like to watch it. So, what do you say, Bakugo? The creepy butt hand guy was scratching at his neck idly, and Katsuki wondered how a crusty effer like him was leading a villain gang. You really think I'm gonna side with the effers who kidnapped Izuku and wanted to turn me into a Frankenstein monster when I was little? Yeah right. The BLD-caked fingers pause, and there is a shift in the air. Katsuki almost thinks he might have gone too far, when one of the doors opens, and in step the blue fire freak and a suspiciously unbound Icy Hot. Krusty Effer smirks behind his hand. Ah, I see the brotherly reunion went well, then. Katsuki looks between the two, and yeah, maybe if skin graft Effer was less mutilated he could look a bit like an older, edgy Icy Hot, but still. There was no way Icy Hot sided with the villains just to spite his old man and because some supposed brother tugged at his heartstrings. Their eyes meet, and Icy Hot looks pale and a little off-kilter, but he takes a quick glance at his cuffs, then locks gazes again and raises an eyebrow, barely noticeable. Katsuki has to suppress a grin. Izuku leaned against the wall outside Yorozu's hospital room, a cacophony of arguing voices carrying outside through the slightly open door. Please, 𝐼𝐼, we can't just leave those two to rot with the villains. Kirishima wailed, and Izuku wonders how many times the redhead had been making his case already. Please make us another tracker. But the heroes are already working on freeing them, aren't they? Juru cut in, her voice sounding uncharacteristically nervous. We are teenagers, Kirishima, just leave it to the pros. Going after them would be illegal, Kero. There is a frustrated growl, and then Ida speaks up. I really think we shouldn't head out. That's kinda hypocritical, isn't it? Shinsu's drawl answers, and Ida splutters. That's exactly why I'm saying this. This is all my fault, Uraraka whispered, likely thinking she won't be heard over the arguing, but no such luck. What are you talking about, Kero? She doesn't mean anything. Izuku finally speaks up, entering the room and closing the door behind himself with his foot. He's careful to keep the gun holster under his leather jacket hidden, raising an eyebrow at them. You guys really don't know how to be subtle, do you? He crosses his arms as he looks at all of them in order. The heroes are preparing as we speak. I gave them info on the League's hideouts. There is no reason for any of you to be there. Uraraka looks at him with wet eyes, and he almost feels sorry for her. But if I hadn't dash, Uraraka, he cuts her off. I warned Aizawa. There were extra precautions. Nothing would have changed without you, trust me. Kirishima looks between them. What are you talking about? None of your business, Izuku waves him off. I mean it, don't interfere, you'll just make things worse for the heroes and your classmates. You're just saying that because you hate Bakugo's guts. Izuku raises an eyebrow at Kirishima. Yeah, and I don't hate Todoroki, so what's your point, exactly? What do you think you'll be able to do that the heroes can't, here? He turns back around to the door. Just stay put like good little hero brats, you can run into danger and die once you have your licenses. Izuku doesn't expect them to heed his advice. He has no delusions that the type of teenagers to enroll in the most competitive hero school of the country are also the type of teenagers to ignore common sense and orders and rush into danger like headless chickens. He is slightly surprised by the group that decided to be dumbass, however. Kirishima was a given, really. Uraraka he could understand, feeling guilty about her role in the mess. Ida and Yorozu, however, not so much. Okay, to be completely fair, Ida had attempted to shank Stain. But come on and fine, Ida was chaperoning them. But please, he would shank a beach if given the chance, and no one could convince him otherwise. He watches them walk off the hospital grounds and clears his throat, smirking slightly at their surprised screams. And where do you think you're going? Kirishima glares at him uncharacteristically, and Izuku is almost inclined to be impressed. You can't stop us. Can't I? He tilts his head, one eyebrow raised. The light of the street lamp casts the scar over his eye in sharp relief. Do you remember our first lesson together? The four students are silent, and it's all the answer he needs. With a bone-weary sigh he pushes off the hospital wall, hands buried in the pockets of his leather jacket. The metal of the gun is cold at his back, loaded with a single bullet. I'll come with and make sure you idiots don't get yourselves killed. The kids relax at his words, and Izuku tries not to feel guilty about lying to them. In another life, perhaps, he could have been their friend, rather than use them for his own gains. No use dwelling on what ifs. Principal Nezu, is it possible that Todoroki Shoto was working with the League of Villains to give support to newfound allegations of child and spousal abuse against Endeavor? We heard UA has been housing a member of the League of Villains, who was instrumental in human experimentation. Is that true? Eraserhead. There have been rumors that a minor has been used by you as an undercover agent. Any comments on that, Detective Tsukochi? Camino Pizza. Shoto wasn't entirely sure if the League of Villains really were stupid enough to order pizza in the middle of a high-profile hostage situation, or if this was their weird way to password check members. Okay, which of you dumbest dash? Shigaraki didn't get to finish as the wall caved in and Ed shot open the door. Neither then. He ducks the debris and rushes at Bakugo, left hand flash-heating the suppressant cuffs and ripping them off, right hand freezing the chains binding his classmate to the chair. Bakugo flexes his arms with a savage grin, the links bursting apart as he jumps to his feet. Was wondering what took you so long, Icy Hot. Shoto rolls his eyes, now back to back with him. I wasn't going to risk Shigaraki dusting me, you know. Yeah, whatever. There is pandemonium then, and for a moment it looks like the heroes were making quick work of the villains that almost impressed Shoto. But then he feels something like bile climb up his throat, and it has nothing to do with his father's voice echoing up from the street. His stomach swoops and the room tilts, and then he isn't standing in a caved-in bar but in the middle of BLD-covered rubble. Izuku watches Kirishima, Ida, and Uraraka fly across the battlefield and Katsuki propel himself towards them with two large explosions. His eyes meet Todoroki's where he is trying to fend off Darby's blue flames, and the other teen seems to understand quite quickly. He throws up a giant ice wall, not quite as impressive as the one from the festival, using the distraction to quickly slide over on an ice path where he stumbles into Yorozu, shivering slightly. I didn't expect you of all people, he grounds out, slowly heating himself back up with his left half. Izuku shrugs in an attempt to feign nonchalance, eyes trained on the happenings beyond their caved-in wall. Someone had to chaperone these idiots. My, a raspy voice sounds, and the cold that washes over Izuku has nothing to do with his quirk or Todoroki's ice. He coughs up bile and the world tilts before a hard grasp on his throat grounds him again, now several feet in the air. I didn't expect this, I admit. Then you're dumber than I thought, you dish, his cut off by the hand on his throat tightening, and the edges of his vision blur. He hears All Might stop in his tracks somewhere behind him, and for a moment his gaze locks on Shigaraki's somewhere behind All for One. So insolent, he tis gaze. And here I thought I had taught you better than this. I guess even that quirk I gave you couldn't fix you, 𝐒𝐿. Izuku's eyes widen as black and red tendrils of energy erupt from All for One's hand, searing pain shooting through his nerves as it takes his all not to black out right in the man's grasp. Oh well. Izuku distantly feels wind soar past him and his stomach swoop as he sails through the air before his back hits a hastily made ice wall barely cushioning his impact. Midoriya-san. Yorozu's voice sounds distant amongst the ringing in his ears, and he coughs up BLD. There are hands propping him up, one warm, one cold, and the girl is producing a handkerchief from her palm. He coughs again and waves her off, trying to sit up straighter without the help of the still shivering Todoroki behind him. Izuku's hand comes up to the comm link in his left ear, somehow still in place, and he blinks to focus his gaze on the battle. All Might, he coughs again, but shakes his head as he tries to properly steady himself, his right hand reaching for the gun in its holster. I'm currently at about 930 from you, can you get me free? Another cough shakes him. Get me free line of sight to his back. Is that a gun? Yorozu shrieks and Izuku hurries to take his hand off the communicator, throwing her a quick glare that is not as effective as he wishes it would be with the way he feels his vision gray. That free enough line of sight for you. Todoroki's voice is low and as monotone as ever, and Izuku has to commend the other teen for keeping a level head. He nods, aiming the gun at the villain's back. Amongst the noise of the superpowered battle, the shot is only heard by the three of them. Yagi Toshinori had dreamed of what it would be like to see his nemesis perish, to finally see his MSTR avenged. For that infernal smile to finally just stop. He sees the shot more than hears it. Toshinori had heard from Aizawa about the boy's shooting skills, but it was something else to see it with his own BLD-clouded eyes. There must have been a good distance between them and Midoriya, and he himself could barely make out the weapon in his hands. Toshinori thinks that if All for One still had eyes they would be wide now as he staggers, likely more from the shock than the wound itself. He will have nightmares of what followed. The thing about immortality quirks is that once they disappear, all that borrowed time returns in one fell swoop, your true age finally catching up with you. The boogeyman of the underworld had lived more than 200 years. He had seen the dawn of quirks, of heroes and villains, witnessed the birth of a new era. But nothing is forever. Toshinori can't say if the ash that remains makes for a fitting end to him. Naomasa waits for the EMT to give the Todoroki boy the all-clear before he approaches. There is dust in his hair and a streak of BLD on his cheek, just under his scar. The worn leather jacket he is wearing looks at odds with the rest of his outfit, and he dimly thinks he recognizes it from somewhere before it clicks. How nice of Midoriya to lend you his jacket. Naomasa had seen the boy as he was loaded into an ambulance, unconscious. There was no way he had loaned Todoroki anything but the BLD on his face. Todoroki blinks at him like a cat, pulling the jacket closed around his chest. Naomasa thinks he sees something glint underneath it, but he doesn't pry. What's going to happen to him? He raises an eyebrow. Did he do something? The only heroes close enough to Midoriya's inquiry over the comlink had been All Might and Gran Torino, the others either blown far enough away to be out of range or unconscious. The only ones who'd seen the shot were Yorozu, Todoroki, All Might and the League of Villains that had disappeared through a portal made by Kurogiri shortly after. There was no body, and no one could find the remnants of the bullet or the casing, or find the gun. There is no evidence and no witnesses if you let it drop, Naomasa, Toshinori had told him, blue eyes hollow and haunted and incredibly tired and relieved. Let us have this. Todoroki pauses, blinks again. His arms cross over his chest and his left hand twitches to the back, as if itching to make sure something is there and hidden. Naomasa recognizes the way the jacket bulges towards the boy's back. He didn't stop them. True, Naomasa concedes, hands in the pockets of his trench coat. His elbow taps against his holstered gun, almost at his back. Aizawa might be a bit angry with him, but knowing him he'll be glad he kept you kids out of trouble. Todoroki nods. Is there anything else? I'd like to dash, go meet your friends, yes, I imagine. The boy seems bemused by the choice of words, and at his interruption. I'll drive you to the hospital, if you want. Midoriya is going to the same one as your classmates, and it might be preferable to being in public right now. Both their gazes flicker to the police barrier and the flashing lights of cameras and shouted questions of the reporters, and Todoroki sighs in the way Naomasa has seen from underground heroes and sleep-deprived officers. Thank you, detective. Izuku's gaze flickers to the door of his hospital room as it opens, and isn't surprised by Detective Tsukochi stepping in, followed by Eraserhead. He is momentarily surprised by All Might and Gran Torino coming through, though mostly because last he'd seen them they looked as dead on their feet as he had felt before he'd been knocked out cold by his concussion and the after-effects of getting his quirk taken away. The detective smiles as he meets his eyes. Glad to see you're awake, Midoriya-kun. Something in his expression must have given him away because Tsukochi adds on. The students are fine, by the way. It was quite nice of you to loan the Todoroki kid your jacket. Ah, so that's where his gun went, not that he really understood what made the other teenager cover for him like that. The other three men throw the detective strange looks but don't question him as they take seats. Izuku had wondered why the nurse had brought in so many chairs and placed them facing the foot of his bed earlier. So that's what this was. Now, problem child, Eraserhead starts, eyes narrowed and bloodshot. Care to explain why my students were at the Nomu factory bailing out Bakugo and Todoroki? Izuku shrugs and immediately regrets it. His bruised ribs really didn't like the movement. They weren't going to not go, and I figured they needed someone who wasn't an idiot with them. Interesting, considering there was not one brain cell between the lot of you. I resent that. Now, Aizawa, young Midoriya, let's not blow this out of proportion, All Might interjected, the sleeves of his oversized shirt flapping with the movement of his hands. The important thing is that it all worked out, isn't it? Without them present things would have been quite a lot worse. Besides, Izuku adds, certainly not pouting. You never rescinded my permission to supervise them and their quirk usage. None of what we did was illegal. You always have to think you're the smartest person in the room, don't you? Eraserhead was positively seething at this point. You all could have died. You could have seriously obstructed the mission. It's a wonder no one worthwhile died, and the only one who lost his quirk is the kid who was slowly dying from having it in the first place. I took a calculated risk. And I'm starting to think you're really bad at math for a genius, you stupid brat. Eraserhead yells as he gets up. Stop treating yourself as expendable. You are lucky Todoroki cushioned your impact or you would be dead now, and what good would that have done, here? All the thing work we did on convincing the commission would have been for nothing, and for what? For you to martyr yourself. As a fu to All for One. What was your thing goal with this suicide mission, you brat? Izuku is about to retort when Eraserhead's words finally sink it. What are you talking about? We know you went there with the goal to take All for One's quirk away, kid. Gran Torino finally speaks up, one eye obscured by bandages. Sasaki confirmed that you worked on quirk-erasing bullets for the Yakuza, and Toshinori saw you shoot. Tsukochi sighs, obviously giving up on trying to pretend they didn't know. Can't say it wasn't a smart move, but the execution could have been a bit more graceful. Izuku, Eraserhead speaks up again, quieter now, and Izuku is startled at his use of his given name. You're usually more careful than this, so why dash? He stops himself, blinks, then pps his head. Ah, I see. Izuku shifts, suddenly uncomfortable. He hates feeling like people see through him, like he's losing control of the situation. What? You care about them? He scoffs. Oh, please dash. Oh no, you're not getting out of this, brat. Eraserhead interrupts him. The moment Ida was in danger, you rushed towards him despite being unable to use your quirk. You lost a finger saving his life. You shot a Nomu in the air to save me. You killed a member of the League of Villains knowing it could compromise you to save a single kid. You helped save Todoroki and Bakugo, who you hate, and shot and killed All for One in plain sight of the League, blowing your cover. You care about these kids. Izuku glares at him. I don't. Oh, I think you do, Eraserhead says, a smirk curling his lips. And they do too, you know. They're all crowding the Diamond waiting room hoping to get to visit you and make sure you're okay. He breathes, running a hand through his hair. Todoroki committed a felony to save your butt. Izuku grips at his bedsheets, glaring at his lap. They're stupid if they do. I'm not worth caring about. And why is that? Tsukochi speaks up. Why shouldn't they care? Why are you not worth caring about, Midoriya? He scoffs bitterly, rolling his eyes and ignoring the slight dizziness that brings. Oh, I don't know. I've committed several murders, for one. I've experimented on humans. I've helped several criminal and villain organizations commit countless crimes. His voice dips. I'm a villain. I don't think so, All Might says, his voice uncharacteristically serious. and Izuku looks up to meet his eyes in surprise. A villain wouldn't rush to someone's aid and risk life and limb to save them, or save a hero's life. A villain wouldn't save a little child from a murderer or rid the world of the worst villain to ever exist. Young Midoriya, I don't think 1A sees you as a villain, or young Kuta. Frankly, his blue eyes twinkle as he shoots a glance at Eraserhead. I think Aizawa-kun, and I don't see you as a villain either. What you did was quite the opposite, in fact. Oh please, you can't be saying dash, but we are, Eraserhead says, sounding incredibly tired. You're a hero, kid, and we've been working our butts off to try and convince the commission to let you into the hero course. Then you go and make us doubt ourselves halfway through with the whole traitor business, and then you go and be a Fing martyr and almost die. You are almost as bad as All Might. I do resent that, Aizawa-kun, All Might interjects, but there is no malice in his words. He turns to Izuku, who doesn't really know what to say. Do you remember the first time we spoke? He nods mutely, not sure where the man is going. Well, I recall you asking me if I had a successor yet. You said no. All Might nods, an uncharacteristically small smile on his face. I think I've found one, though.